Thank you. And good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 and Dakota Nations territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'll be chairing our meeting today. Joining me on the panel is Stu McPherson, connecting via Zoom, and Brent McIntyre, who's in the committee room. Our secretary to the board is Cara Balshaw, and our assessor is Merrick Frolik. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We have 3 items on our docket today. And Ms. Balshaw, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, for the record, please state your name. You'll have to unmute yourself first, please.
For you to be Merrick Frolik.
Thank you. And do you affirm the evidence you will give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And maybe we'll just start with Mr. Mercury first. For the record, can you please state your name?
James Mercury.
Do you affirm the evidence you will present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Bailey, for the record, can you please state your name?
Robert Harold Bailey.
Do you affirm the evidence you will present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Balshaw. All 3 items on our docket today relate to 870 La Jamodier. I note that there are preliminary issues for 2 of the items, the first 2 items on our document. The assessor is requesting that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant. I'm just thinking about the process today. When we hear that evidence, is the same evidence to be presented for both items? My question is, can we hear them together, or is there a need to hear them separately?
I'll start, Jamie, and then you can finish where I left off, if that makes sense to you. So Mr. Mercury and I had spent about maybe 2.5 hours this morning talking about various issues with regards to our docket this morning. And in a nutshell, because Mr. Mercury has created one docket, I've created 3 separate documents, but essentially the brief's the same. So when we're looking at the issue with regards to non-compliance, the 2021 value initially on file number 21464 is $19,327,000. If I'm speaking out of turn, let me know. But Mr. Mercury has agreed to accept this value for the first part of 2020 for 2021 for this file number. The second file number that we have in place is for file number 21464. That value is $27,498,000. For this property here, what will end up taking place is that because you have two supplementals in the year of the penalty, we will discuss and we will present briefs for this value for file number 465. But the order would be written up in such a manner where the penalty would take place for the last 2 months of the year, for November and December of 2021. And the new value that would be potentially created or not created would be for 2022. So that's what Mr. Mercury and I have discussed, because there are municipal board orders where I've had similar situations where there have been supplementals and there's been issues of non-compliance. And what has taken place is this is for an appeal in 2016, whereby there was an initial value in 2016. There was a supplemental in July of 2017. And then in 2017, the value was actually lower than the 2016 value. And Mr. Mercury and I wanted to just make sure that you had understood what we were thinking in the process. And if I've missed anything, Jamie, do you want to finish up with that?
Yeah, I think that summarizes, hopefully the board is following. So essentially, Mr. Froelich and I have agreed actually on two issues. On one is the issue of the deferral point. And there's also, Mr. Froelich hasn't spoken to this yet, but there's an agreement on square footage of the property, which we'll get to, which I think will save a lot of time today, because that is an issue that has been dealt with extensively in the briefs. But leaving that aside for the moment, the deferral issue, of course, only applies for the year 2021. So any reduction in value for that year would be deferred to the following years. So to make matters simplified, we thought it would be helpful simply to confirm the first supplemental assessment, as Mr. Froelich indicated, at $19,327,000. That assessment becomes moot as of November of 21, when a second supplemental is issued. And that is at the increased value of $27,498,000. That value is in contention. So while we will be arguing that value for 21, there would be an agreement on a deferral with respect to this, Mr. Froelich indicated, with respect to those 2 months. But 2022 will be unimpacted by any deferral issue. So therefore, any reduction in assessed value will just stand as is. So I think we are all on the same page. The only concern I had is that if we were to simply confirm 2021, then there's a concern that we would have is that value would automatically carry forward into 22. So we can't do that. I'm not sure if the board's following me there. So we are arguing the value of 21 at $27,498,000. But yes, Mr. Froelich and I are on the same page there in terms of process. We just don't want to make sure that the board orders when they are issued are issued correctly. I'm certainly open to clarify any confusion in that regard if there is any at this stage. I'm sure Mr. Froelich is as well.
Okay, so I'm hearing that there is an agreement to confirm 19.3, on the first item, file number 21464, an agreement to confirm the assessed value of 19,327. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then do we need to withdraw the assessor's request for the burden of proof there, or no, just leave it as is because it's confirmed and it doesn't matter?
I think it becomes moot.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, and then just to carry on, we'll hear file number 21465 related to that 27,498 value. And there is a request for a burden of proof to be placed on the applicant. We'll hear that as is. And file number 3, item 21466 will just be a carryover from item 2. That's correct? That's what we're hearing? Do I have that right? Okay, so I guess then what we do need to still do, Mr. Froelich, is we need to go back and we need to read in the particulars for item number 1.
With regards to file number 464.
Correct, because we haven't done that yet officially. We've just discussed
Okay.
some agreements.
Yep, for sure. So file number 21464, roll numbers 0603005500, address is 870 Lachimodier Boulevard. For 2021, we have an assessed value of $19,327,000.
Okay.
Madam Chair, sorry, before we move on,
Yes.
the decision does have to be reached on that non-co-op. So I believe in the circumstances as the way they've been presented, the assessor will withdraw that request on the first file and the applicant will not contest it on the second file.
Okay.
And I don't believe if that is the case, then there is any need to go in camera.
Thank you. Mr. Froelich, then?
Okay. So how do you want me to proceed now?
If you can just, go ahead.
That I'm just going to withdraw the issue of non-compliance?
Correct.
Okay, I'm withdrawing the appeal for non-compliance.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just write this here.
Just want to make sure I have my ducks in order.
Of course, us too. Okay, and does anybody have any questions on that item before we move on? No, hearing none. Okay, we'll go to item number 2 on our agenda. Mr. Froelich, can you start off by reading the particulars? And I guess then we'll then address your request for a burden of proof to be placed on the applicant. We'll deal with that first before we go into dealing with the assessed value.
And for the record, there will also be a recommendation for this just based on the square footage after discussions that Mr. Mercury and I had this morning as well. So I'd like the record to state that.
Okay.
File number 215465. Roll number 0603005500. The property is 870 Lachimodier. The initial assessment that we had for this property was $27,498,000. And I'd like to make a recommendation for this to reduce the assessed value to
Mr. Froelich, do we still have, we should be dealing with your request for burden of proof first.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
That's okay. Myself. And so I would like to make an application for the burden of proof to be presented upon the applicant.
Okay, go ahead and present your evidence.
You want me to go through my entire brief and present it all?
Well,
sorry, I should clarify. We're not contesting the requester's request for non-compliance
okay.
on this matter. So I unless the board needs to hear it, I think.
Okay. So Ms. Balshaw, we're okay to just proceed with the portion on the value now?
I believe so. If you would like to call a short recess just to confirm that with your panel members, we can do that.
Panel members, do you think we need to go into camera?
I would like to just for a short 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay, then we'll do that. Okay, give us 5 minutes, please, and then we'll return.
Thank you.
Thank you very much and welcome back. Just in matter of process, given that there was no contest to the assessor's request for the burden of proof to be placed on the applicant in this case goes first to present evidence on assessed value. So I don't know who would like to start us off there, but please, Mr. Applicant, one of you, go ahead.
Sorry, there we go. I'm here with Mr. Robert Bailey of Opus Valuations from Ontario. Mr. Bailey prepared the valuation report and the rebuttal material that has been presented to the board. And so Mr. Bailey will be speaking primarily to the valuation issues. I may have some comments in summary, but for the most part, it will be Mr. Bailey. So, Mr. Bailey, maybe you could take yourself off of mute, and we could proceed with the reports. Just by way of background, Mr. Bailey, are you able to unmute yourself? Robert? To be the top right-hand corner. There you go. Okay. All right. Just by way of background, Mr. Bailey, could you please provide a little bit of background on yourself, who you are, and your credentials, and in particular your involvement with this property at 870 La Jamodier Boulevard for Maple Leaf? And I know in your material you've included a curriculum vitae at the back. I think it's at tab 16 of your report. But, could you just provide the board a little bit of background on yourself? Robert, do you have it? Do you unmute yourself? There you are. Okay. Could you hear me okay? Robert, can you hear us? Maybe a volume issue. No. Can you hear us, Robert? Appears to be an audio issue at his end.
It does appear to be.
Can you hear us okay? You know what? I'm not sure what the issue is on his end. I can try muting. If I can just try calling him right now, see if I can troubleshoot this. If that makes sense, Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I will just mute my line.
Do you want to call a short recess until this matter is sorted? Anyone?
Sorry, maybe just hold on the line for 30 seconds and we'll see if we can resolve it.
Hi, Jamie.
Oh.
Just a sec. I don't know what's going on.
Can you, Madam Chair, can you hear?
We heard him speak there. Yeah.
Okay. Robert, you want to test I'm just calling Robert here on my phone. It appears he's having difficulty with this audio.
Yeah, I don't know what happened when we disconnected. When I came back on, my audio said it wasn't working. So I'm not sure what's
we can hear you now. We can hear you now, Mr. Bailey.
Can't hear us though.
Hey, Robert, can you hear the Madam Chair?
No, not really. Let me see.
Madam Chair, may we just call a short recess until this is sorted out, please?
Sure, we'll just call a short recess to deal with these technical issues. Thank you very much. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. And we'll begin item number 2, 21-465. I think we were at the applicants presenting their evidence on the assessed value of the property. Mr. Bailey, Mr. Mercury, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bailey, if you have reference to your report that you've submitted.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and there are a number of tabs to that document or addenda. I assume that the board, I don't know if the board has electronic or hard copies or both.
We have electronic. We have electronic.
You have electronic. Okay, and Mr. Bailey, are you working off of an electronic or a hard copy?
Well, I've got both available.
All right. Seeing that the board is going off of hard copies, sorry, electronic copies, it's not always easy to just pull up a tab number, but I believe your CV is at the end of your report. If you could I just wanted you to introduce yourself in terms of your background, who you are with, and your familiarity with this property. If you could just briefly, Mr. Bailey.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Robert Bailey. I am president of Opus Valuation, Inc., and have been. I've done appraisal and property assessment throughout North America on various large industrial complexes, as well as development land, redevelopment sites, shopping centers, office buildings, hotels, apartments, and a wide variety of special purpose facilities. A few of the undertakings I've done are for IBM, Caterpillar, Bombardier, Dow Chemical, Cascades, Maple Leaf Foods, Canada Bread, Via Rail, amongst many others. I founded Opus Valuation in 2016, and it's primarily an assessment, advisory, and valuation company. Prior to that, I was a vice president with Cushman & Wakefield, as well as being the practice leader for the property tax department for about 7 years. And before that, I was a senior valuator with DeVeris Alexander Corporation, which again is a company specializing in assessment, valuation, and consulting. Prior to that, I was from 1983 to 1996. I was project manager with American Appraisals, responsible for both overseeing other appraisers and also doing appraisals across Canada and throughout North America. And finally, prior to that, I was manager of Beck Valuations and Cost Systems, which was later purchased by Marshall and Swift, and that was from 1979 to 1983. I've done a number of courses related to both real estate and architecture and fine art, including University of Toronto for 5 years, Bachelor of Architecture and Fine Arts. I did the Appraisal Institute courses, as well as undertaking the Ontario Real Estate Association courses towards becoming a real estate agent. And I guess that's a brief summary of my credentials.
And I understand that you are intimately familiar with the subject property at 870 La Jamodier, having taken on various assignments for Maple Leaf Foods over the course of the last 2 decades. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, I started with this. My first appraisal was in the mid-'80s, doing work for Burns Food, the former owner of this property. And I've had a relatively consistent contact with this property over the years since then.
Right. And so with that, Mr. Bailey, what I'd ask you to do is just go to the beginning of your report and provide a concise overview of, if you could, your report with, of course, the focus of your report and in terms of what is an issue at this hearing, that being an appropriate rental rate and an appropriate cap rate for the subject property, as you know.
Right.
And we will clarify for the board in advance, although you can touch on this in your report, Mr. Bailey, on the issue of rentable area, Madam Chair. Again, we have reached agreement with Mr. Froelich on that rather complex issue that Mr. Froelich mentioned. We spent some time this morning, we spent time in the past dealing with that, but I think it will save a considerable time in this hearing. And fortunately, we have been able to reach agreement on that number. So much of what is in Mr. Bailey's report, written report on square footage, you now have the agreement of the parties on what the square footage is, and it is in fact the square footage, the rentable area that is reported by Mr. Bailey in his report. Mr. Froelich can confirm that, but we're in agreement on that. So with that, Mr. Bailey, I'll turn it over to you to walk the board through your report and description of the property.
Okay. Page 3 of my, actually page 6 of your electronic copy, page 5 of the printed copy, there's a brief summary of the property there. It's a large industrial property. The property is zoned M3 industrial. It's on a large parcel of land, approximately 1.5 million square feet or 34.567 acres. The reason for the appeal was several additions to the building, which have grown the building from a leasable area of 358,024 square feet to its current leasable area of 445,885 square feet. It was built in 21 stages between 1964 and 2021 and has gone through quite a history. I believe Mr. Froelich has given us the assessments returned, but what I'd like to do is draw your attention first to the previous page. There's an aerial photograph, and I'd like to draw your attention to that. And from that aerial photograph, you can see that the building is built of very many small little additions, all forming a somewhat U-shaped property that or building on the property. It really is not a typical industrial property in that it is made up of so many different small areas and has been added to so significantly over time. It really is a mishmash of buildings, all with varying heights, varying purposes, and all built at varying times over that time period. I believe there are 13 different periods of construction for this building and 21 different building sections. Within the building, it's equally cut up with a lot of very small rooms or a mixture of very small and medium-sized rooms. So it's not your typical warehouse by any means. And the previous page to that are some further illustrations, which from the outside of the building, you can see that, again, the building's built with many different sections, and each of the photographs show at least three to six different constructions in a single photograph. The building is less than ideal for any purpose. It was built as a and again I'm referring to your electronic page 9 and my paper page 8. The original building was 216,752 square feet and was built in 64, and it was built as a slaughter and cut facility for beef, lamb, pork, and it had relatively low ceiling heights to the original section, 12.5 to just under 16 feet. And it underwent 7 building additions prior to Maple Leaf acquiring the property in 1994. Additions in 69, 72, 82, 85, 87, and 88. It was producing hundreds of different food items when Maple Leaf bought it. And since they've acquired it, they have diminished the food products considerably down to 3 main areas. Pork being the only thing they're processing. They're no longer doing any slaughtering at this facility, and they're producing sausages, hams, and bacon. So 3 basic lines with a number of sub-products to each of those lines. So in that sense, the additions in stages have really hindered this facility, even though Maple Leaf has added now 3 different sections since acquiring the property. It is by no means a typical property and would be very difficult property in the market to sell or lease. And I think it all should be kept in mind that about 40% of this property was built 50 years or longer ago. And about 40% has been built in the last 20 years, and 20% was built in between about 1972 and the turn of the century. So I think I wanted to preference what I have to say about the rents by the building and the condition of the building. Of course, the building, because it's producing food, is very well kept inside, but nonetheless, it suffers greatly because of the cut up nature. And on page 11, I've presented a chart basically outlining what the building is and what the ideal building would be. In terms of the configuration of the building, the ideal would be a very regular building where probably a long and narrow building where the process starts at one end and goes through the process emerging from the building at the other end, instead of going in a U shape. It is built in many more sections than it should be. As I said, it's built in about 21 sections, whereas ideally it would be built in 2 to 4 sections. The flow within the building is in every direction, whereas it should be in a continuous flow from receiving at one end of the building to shipping at the other. This is a particular problem for a food plant in that you're looking to minimize cross-contamination between raw product and finished product. And they're looking to not have the paths of raw product cross the path of finished product, which they do in all types of instances in the subject. The other problem is that despite the higher heights of some of the new additions, overall the building height, which is about 22.8 feet on average, it ranges from about 12.5 feet to 36 feet. But ideally it should be, one or two heights between 24 and 36 feet. So I guess that would be what I'd like to say about the building itself. Would you like me to move on to the rents, Jamie?
Yes, if you could.
Yeah. I looked for rents in the Winnipeg market. I limited myself to larger buildings over 100,000 square feet. And I looked at rents occurring between the beginning of 2010 and the base date of valuation in, I guess it's April 1st, 2018. And I found 18 leases which I felt were arm's length leases. They ranged in leasing prices from $2 to $4.68, and they had an average of I'm now on my chart on your electronic page 13, my page 12, and they ranged from $2 a square foot to $4.65 a square foot, and averaged $3.39 a square foot for an average building size of 185,016 square feet. I did time adjust the the rents from the date of lease to the base date, and that brought up the average lease rate from $339 to $355. So a modest increase over that time. But I guess the important thing to note on these 18 rentals is that there were no rentals of properties as large as the subject property. And generally speaking, the rental properties that did lease were more typical industrial properties. They tended to be relatively square boxes, unlike the subject, and tended to have been built in far fewer stages. As I said, I did time adjust all of the rental rates, and I think my analysis for that would start at my tab 12, and again, that's I can see if I can reference the page here for you. Okay, so I'd be starting at your page 57. So on page 58, I have a graph there where I have graphed all of the lease rates over time. And as you can see, I've achieved a monthly increase rate of 0.0486% per month over that time period. And I've used that to adjust each of the rental rates from the date of lease to the base date of valuation. I've also adjusted the rental rates based on the area of the buildings that were leased, and you'll find that on your page 60. And as you can see from the chart, the rental rate falls steeply or relatively steeply in the 100,000 to 125,000 square foot range, and then falls more gradually from 125,000 square feet to the largest lease, which was just over 350,000 square feet. And based on that, I was able to determine a formula for to size adjust each individual rental based on the size of the unit, and adjust that to the subject property size of 445,000 square feet. And finally, I had a look at how the age of a building on page 61. I had a look at how the age of the building affected the rental rate being achieved. And I did find that there was a gradual increase in the rental rate for newer buildings than older buildings. As my newest rental was about 1979, I assumed that the increase would continue beyond that. But again, I was able to establish a formula to adjust for the age of the rental property. So based on that, I was able to adjust, going back to my rental chart, I was able to adjust the median rental rate achieved from the 18 separate rentals for both time, size, and age of the building. And based on that, I came up with an adjusted rental rate of $3.11. However, in doing my analysis for my rebuttal, I did find there was a small error in the time adjustment, and at tab 14 of my rebuttal, I did correct for that. I also corrected for one of the leases that both the assessor and I used, but I had used some misinformation, believing that in 2014 the original building had fully leased, whereas only a very small portion of it had leased. So I have accepted the assessor's rental of that, and I'll speak to that later, and that's for a property 1750 Inkster Boulevard. And I've used a rent instead of using a rent of $335 a square foot. I have used $518 a square foot for that. But based on that, my adjusted rental rate has decreased from 311 to 308. And sorry, that, well, the analysis at tab 14 is very similar. It's the analysis at tab 15 I had meant to refer to. And we can go over that.
What page is that, Mr. Bailey? Sorry.
Let me go to my rebuttal and find you the page for that.
I believe it's page 110. Is that
okay?
That is a. Or no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's page. It is page 117 of the rebuttal report.
And then your revised valuation based.
Yeah,
on that
I've marked in red the change I've made to that analysis.
Okay.
And that brought me to a rent of $3.08 a square foot, adjusted for time, size, and age of the building.
Okay, and where do we see that in your revised valuation calculation?
The rebuttal valuation is on page 116.
Okay.
And
We don't have the rebuttal evidence.
you don't have it.
I think
Sorry,
it was just.
Madam Chair, if I may, the rebuttal evidence is now in the SharePoint link, and I believe Mr. Bailey had been speaking to to that report all along, but it is very similar to the rebuttal, it sounds like. I was following along, and the page numbers seem to be the same, but the rebuttal, sorry, Mr. Bailey, I didn't realize you were speaking to that right out of the gate there.
No, actually, I just flipped over to that to correct I had been speaking to
Okay.
the original page, my original page 13, and I wanted to draw and also I guess the tab was it tab?
Okay.
Yeah.
So for our panel and for the assessor then, the rebuttal evidence has been distributed. So you can access that. It is the rebuttal 1 from the applicant.
Yeah, it's a relatively minor change. It's only a decrease of 3 cents a square foot to correcting the information for on the rental of 1750 Inkster Boulevard and correcting the error in the formula for time adjustment.
Okay.
So based on my analysis and the adjustments to my 18 rental comparables, if we go, I now come to a rental rate for the subject property of 308 as opposed to the rental value of 311. I also found that the cap rate used to return the valuation for the subject property appeared too low. And I did look at a number of things to come up with that. I looked at both the Cbre and Collier's first quarter of 2018 capitalization rate surveys that gave us a range of cap rates for typical B-class industrial buildings in Winnipeg, ranging from 6.5% to 7.25%. Cushman Wakefield felt that in the same time period, first quarter of 2018, typical capitalization rates for B-class industrial buildings were a little higher, at 7 to 7.5%. I also looked at the city's analysis, which had capitalization rates from 5.5 to 9.8%. And looking at the 80% quartile, the cap rates range from 6.3 to 7.8%. And I guess based...
sorry, Mr. Bailey, just so the board can follow to make sure that's at
that
page.
would be at page 15 of the electronic copy.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. 15. Okay, thank you.
In of what? Oh, sorry.
Merrick, you were asking?
Oh, that would be page 15 of the cap rate study?
No, I was just referring to my report where I summarize it. I do have all of the cap rate studies at my tab 13.
Okay, yeah.
I have the full cap rate studies from CBRE, Colliers, and Cushman Wakefield.
Sorry, I thought you were referencing that. Okay, thank you.
So I guess going back to what I said about the building initially, it's a very unique building, and it certainly, as due to its age and its cut-up nature, would be considered a Class B building, and due to its size and nature, I would expect it to have a very high cap rate on it, towards the extreme upper end of the range. And based on that, I came to a cap rate of 7.75% as being reasonable for the subject property. So on my page 16 of the electronic copy, I was able to calculate my property value, taking we should be referring to page 18 rather than so based on the new effective average age of the building, the 445,885 square feet, and using the cap rate of $3.11, which is slightly high, I came up with a potential rent of $1,386,703.
Can I just ask a question? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Certainly.
I actually have 3 different tables for your valuation summary. I'm just wanting to make sure I'm on the right one.
It's the last one, and it speaks to the value post, I guess, for as of November 2nd, 2021, and as of January 1st, 2022.
Okay, thank you.
And again, so at the corrected rent of 308, our potential rent would be slightly less. It would be $1,373,326, and I deducted the standard vacancy for the area of 5%, a shortfall of 2%, shortfall on the vacant space at 375, and applying a 775 cap rate to the original $3.11 rent. I got a value of $15,579,570, which I rounded to $15,580,000. And on the corrected value, I got a corrected value of $15,419,000. And I guess very briefly, that was my position as to what the value of this property should be as of the base date of valuation.
Okay, there are you have a number of addenda in your report as well, Mr. Bailey. I just wanted to ask you about just backing up in your report a little bit. You made reference to the facility on, I'm looking at page 12 of your report.
Yes.
Facility at 1 Warman Road.
Yes.
You have some narrative on that property. Can you just maybe summarize what you have in your brief there, and why you've addressed that property?
I've addressed the property because it was a Maple Leaf property that they sold in 2015, and it's about a quarter of the size of Lagimodiere. It's also substantially newer than Lagimodiere, far less cut up than Lagimodiere. It has a lower building to land coverage, and it is far less cut up inside. And Maple Leaf sold the property in 2015. And one of the reasons I wanted to look at that sale was that, in my mind, it would set an extreme upper limit of value for the subject property. It sold for $5.1 million, and which represents a selling price of $41.98 a square foot. The current assessment on the subject property is $61.67 per square foot. So it really stood out to me that this property was vastly overassessed. And I did work backwards from the selling price to see what the rent would be for this property, and based on a somewhat lower cap, because this was a much smaller, newer, more desirable building, it worked out to a rent of $3.41 a square foot. I also did want to discuss the sale a little bit because the purchaser did not feel that they could lease the even though it was a fairly nice, new, clean industrial building. The purchaser didn't feel that he could lease it out as is and refurbish the building, hoping to attract multiple tenants. He removed all of the finishes within the building that had to do with the meat processing, as well as any partitioning. But even at the end of that, he could not find tenants for the building, and was approached by another party who was desperate to find a large building and sold the building instead. I understand that buyer has now found that they're not proceeding with using the building for their intended use, and that it in all probability will end up back on the market. But I think the sale of the property in 2015 is a good example to set an upper limit of value for this property. And
when you compare the layout of that building on Warman in relation to
it basically is a large open area, more typical, with a couple small rooms, more typical of a typical standard industrial building, whereas and it is fully rectangular. The plant was all built in one stage. The office had a small addition made to extend the employee welfare area a couple years after it was completed. So I did want to speak to that as setting an upper limit of value.
Okay. If you go to page 20 and 21 of your report, I think it's electronic. You'll have to rotate the page to read it properly. But this is as I understand it, this provides a detailed summary of all of the additions. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me just get there.
But actually, you would probably to get to the current.
Yeah. So this would be on page 23 of the electronic copy. Is that the one you're? No, sorry.
Well, actually, the most current.
We should refer to page 25.
Right, 25. That brings us to current.
Right.
And so, for the benefit of the board, this will show the original construction in 1964. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the top of the page. Generally, they're in chronological order, though I've separated the office from the plant. And as you can see, the office was only built in two sections, two different dates, and the plant was built in roughly 29 sections between 64 and 2021.
And with various different ceiling heights, is that correct?
Yeah, and you can see on the towards the left-hand side the various ceiling heights for each of the sections.
Now there is various cooling equipment within the building. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's interspersed throughout the building. It is not in any particular part of the building, but many of the process areas are cooled because of the process. It's a requirement in manufacturing food products to keep the food product at a below a certain temperature, and for that reason they have to cool the entire process areas where they're doing the processing. And these areas represent about 40% of the entire building, but they are interspersed throughout the building in various locations.
And so, would you describe this as traditional cold storage?
No, it's very, very different from traditional cold storage in that traditional cold storage is where they have large open areas where they're chilling the whole area versus very small rooms here and there that are cooling the product when a certain process is going on. They may be cooking a product in another next door to where they're cooling the product, which is being processed. So there's ambient, there's cooled areas, and then there's cook areas. So it's a mixture of the three throughout the plant.
And just for clarity, the most recent additions are at the bottom there, the Bacon plant addition of 61,035 square feet.
Right. Yeah, and there was also some welfare areas attached to that, and a new water treatment plant as well.
And so you have a newer space that's added on to a building that is has been constructed in various phases. Can you just speak to generally how you treat in real estate valuation, how you would treat newer space, or what weight you would place on the newer space versus the size versus the the overall age of the building. Can you maybe just speak to how you, as an appraiser, would
I would look
adjust
at
that?
it. I would look at it overall, because it's not, it's neither a building built in 2021 nor is it a building built in 2004. And I believe most prospective purchasers would look at it in the overall. They're looking first and foremost at a building that's 445,000 square feet, which is a lot of building. And it's built in so many time periods. They're going to look at it as well. The average being such and such a date, where the average of this building is 1991 after the additions.
And if
I think that they would look at it as a 1991 vintage building, as opposed to none of these. The thing to keep in mind is that none of these areas, whether they're new or old, can operate on their own. They're all reliant on services being provided by a central powerhouse for the heating, for the cooling, for everything, the electricity. If you were looking to divide this up, you would have to put in entirely new heating, cooling, and electrical systems, as well as taking out all of the current demising walls and reconfiguring them for new tenants, as well as putting in office areas for each of the new tenants. So you really couldn't lease out any of these given areas on their own. So looking at the 2021 areas, well, we should put a higher rent on that, really wouldn't be the way a buyer would look at this, or an owner looking to lease it out. He would look at the building as a whole.
So any prospective buyer would look at a single user situation for this building.
Yeah, the cost of converting this to a multi-user would be at least as high as the current assessment.
And if hypothetically Maple Leaf were to list it for sale or to go dark, for example, in terms of overall risk of leasing up this building or selling it, how would you comment on that in relation to other industrial, some of the, for example, the comparables that you've listed? How would that risk level compare?
I think they would. It would be a high risk situation. There would be very, very few users for a building of this size. Just like One Warman Road at a quarter of the size and a much superior building took 4 years to sell. This would probably take considerably longer to find a buyer for, and it would take a very creative buyer willing to take a lot of risk, and they would be looking to get quite a high return from taking that risk. So again, they would be looking at a very high cap rate in determining what their risk would be. It would take years to sell the building. It would also take very many years to lease it up if an owner tried to do that.
I just wanted to ask you, in both your brief and the assessor's brief, there's reference to the appeal history on this particular property going back many years. I think even into the early 2000s anyway. So at page 31, for example, you've listed the appeal history, and some years there were appeals, some years there were settlements, and so forth. I don't intend to go through any of the old appeals, but as a valuer, Mr. Bailey, what, if any, weight do you place on previous assessments or previous appeal processes, how does that factor into your valuation, if at all, for the 2022 taxation year?
I looked at the 2022 year, without looking back on any of the previous settlements. I looked at the market information that was available for this cycle, and that's what led me to my value. Make Believe has their own corporate reasons for deciding to appeal or not appeal in any given year, and where they do voice a concern and ask me to look at it, I will look at it and suggest to them what I think the value should be. The fact that they didn't appeal in certain years, or they didn't appeal at the beginning of this cycle, I think is a corporate decision. And I think it was the shock of the supplementary assessments that brought them to me asking to look at this property again. And so it's been I guess a checkered history. I think the first time I had a look at it for assessment purposes for Maple Leaf was 1997, and after, and then they asked me again in 2004. They did get a settlement. They weren't overly happy with that settlement, so again in 2006 they appealed, and again when their first ham edition went on, again they were concerned about the edition going on and what it would do to their value, so they asked me to get involved prior to the assessment going on there. So I did have a look at it, and again was able to resolve things with the assessor. So again, and again, 2014 and 2016, they asked me to have a look, which I did. And again, each time I looked at it, it was based on the relevant data as of that time period. And each time I looked at it, the building had grown in size and therefore more difficult to lease up and more difficult to sell. So that it really was quite a moving target.
Okay. Those are my questions for you, Mr. Bailey. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Froelich, do you have any questions of the applicant? And currently you're on mute, so I'll just remind you that.
Yes, I'm fine. I had a question initially from the get-go, and I just want to clarify in terms of procedure, because there's some stuff in my rebuttal evidence which is that's been ignored by the applicants, and there's also the very first question that I had when I initially was with the thought process. So, and to clarify, there was an error made with regards to rent on 1750 Inkster Boulevard, where
right.
The rent documented on our original brief was $3.35, and that the actual rent should be $5.18.
Yeah, I tried to verify those leases. I know that I did as best I could on that. First of all, the thing I did find out was that it wasn't 134,000 square feet that leased up in 2014. It was only 60,000 square feet. So what had happened to that property is there was an initial lease of 60,000 square feet in 2014. The tenant then in 2015 took a further 40,000 square feet, and finally the broker seem to think that it was in 2017 they took another 20,000 square feet. But again, he wasn't willing to disclose the rental rate. So I've accepted your rental rate.
Okay, well, the question that I have with regards to that is then, but if there's an increase in the rental rate and all the adjustments and calculations that you've done, you've actually dropped the assessment even further, even though that the rent has increased.
That was due to the fact that some of my adjustments for time adjustment, as I said, there was a small error in my formula for time adjustment, which I picked up on when I was doing my rebuttal.
But would you agree with me if the rents that are being used are lower in your calculations, wouldn't that affect your overall market rents that you're presenting here today? Because inconsistent data leads into inconsistent
right, and then in my rebuttal, I have corrected all of that, and I had overstated the rent due to my size adjustment in my report. It's not a big change. It's only 3-cent difference in
but
my.
Yeah.
Death
by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. Well, it's it was. I guess I'd missed something in checking, and it was a small error, which I corrected.
And so, just to make sure that I have, so can I present some of my rebuttal information right now, Madam Chairperson, or should I just go ahead and ask him some questions right now as well? What would you prefer?
Well, I don't have any thoughts one way or the other as to what you'd like to do. Are the applicants in agreement with Mr. Froelich presenting a rebuttal, or would you like to hold off?
Well, traditionally, we should clarify if Mr. Froelich has questions at this time, it would be appropriate for him to ask Mr. Bailey, and then if once those questions are complete, then normally the board would then ask their questions of Mr. Bailey, and then we would go to, of course, Mr. Froelich's presentation. That would be the normal course. So that would be my expectation. But if Mr. Froelich doesn't have any questions and wishes to save them for later, that's fine too. But that would be the normal.
Yeah, but in those situations that you referenced, Jamie, those are situations when the applicant presents first, when the assessor presents first, not the applicant. So that's a role reversal here.
Well, so in the case of when the assessor goes first, the applicant will ask questions of the assessor, and then the board will ask questions of the assessor, and then we'll proceed from there. So we're just reversing roles here, but.
Mr. Froelich, why don't you continue with asking your questions, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So in is the entire building temperature controlled in one way or another, in terms that there are different areas that are warmer, different areas that are colder? So are they not all, isn't the entire area temperature controlled at different levels?
Well, yes and no. Some areas are not temperature controlled at all because they are cook areas and are. I suppose they're temperature controlled in that they have exhaust systems, but no heating or cooling. Others have heating, others have cooling. So you've got 3 types of space.
So would there not be a premium on that type of space for a potential renter that was looking for that space?
The problem is that no other user would contemplate using this property in exactly the same method as Maple Leaf Foods. So you're never going to find a user who can use a little freezer over here, a bigger freezer over there, a refrigerated area over there, an area with no heat over here. You're just not going to find another user who could use the space in the same manner as Maple Leaf. Even if they were in the same, even if they were a competitor to Maple Leaf, their product mix would be slightly different. If they were buying the machinery and equipment and the business from Maple Leaf, they might contemplate it, but it would only be where they were buying Maple Leaf's business that they might contemplate that.
But if
that's not real estate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, what I'm saying though, it's equivalent to, say, a residential home. If it has a rec room or if it doesn't have a rec room, it has an added feature to the property. So it would not. For me, there would be a premium placed on that. That a significant amount of the areas are temperature controlled.
Yeah, but they couldn't really be used for any other purpose. And Maple Leaf moves the refrigeration around from area to area as they change processes and refine processes. So it's an ever-changing thing within the plant. So
you're saying that there's a lot of flexibility to be adaptive to different potential tenants?
Well, cost to moving things, but yes, they move it around from place to place within the plant as their product mix changes.
Okay. In your adjustments that you've made for market rents, I've noticed that you've used a lot of older leases and that are far away from the reference date. Were you not able to find any other data that would be more closer to the April 1st, 2018 reference date?
Not for buildings over 100,000 square feet. This was what I was able to find that I felt were arm's length leases.
Okay. But so would you agree with me that there are other rents that are of larger sizes that are different than what you've presented here today?
Not larger leases. I thought I had looked at pretty much all of the large leases there were.
Okay. In your adjusted rent factors, I noticed some areas where the adjustment to rent between 2010 and 2018 was 16 cents. And then in another section, the adjustment to rent from 2017 to 2018 was only 21 cents. So wouldn't inflation and market rents have increased more with regards from 2010 to 2018 than from 2017 to 2018? Because to me, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect. So I was wondering if you could explain to me your methodology there.
I adjusted on a linear manner from. Do you have the page number you're referring to?
Well, I'm actually looking at page 12 where I've sort of looked at different leases. So say, for example, on page 12 of your brief, comparable 18, your net rent was $4.50 and your rent adjusted for time was $4.71. Meanwhile, in 2010, for comparable number 4, I had a market rent of $3.50 of 2011, and then it only increased to $3.66. So to me, if you're doing a time adjustment, and even though your graphs and everything like that are impressive, I'm not too sure that the information presented is how accurate it is to be truly reflective of market rents.
Okay. Again, each of them was adjusted on a linear basis between the date of lease and the reference date. So again, unless you can give me some calculations, I have those calculations up in front of me. I'm checking them as we speak, but I'm not, and I see consistent formula doing it, so I'm not sure.
I'm not concerned about the formula. I'm just concerned about what's on page 12. And so,
Yeah, without going back to the formulas, I can't comment on why you think it didn't go up, went up too much between 17 and 18 and not enough between.
Would older rents skew the data that you presented here?
I'd always prefer newer rents, but you can't always get newer rents. So I've used what there is.
Are you familiar with the building history at 680 Mission?
To a degree, yes.
Okay. So did you know initially how it was formulated, like how it was built? What sort of tenants were there?
No, let me just. I do have information on it. I just need to remind myself. Just give me a sec here. Again, yeah. Now I've refamiliarized myself with this. Could you repeat the question again for me?
No problem. So I asked you about the building history about 680 Mission. If you knew how it was originally constructed.
I don't know anything about the original construction of this building. I did notice that the building had undergone a change at some point in time, and the new tenancy went in, but I can't tell you about the original construction of it. No,
because initially that was like a flex warehouse that became a single tenant property.
Right.
So I was wondering if you knew about that at all.
Only that it is now a single tenant. I don't know much about the history of it.
If it could go from multi-tenanted to single tenanted, anything. I guess my point is anything's possible if a person's motivated to make a change.
Yes, and it does happen, and it's always at a cost. It's generally a lot easier to go from multi-tenant to a single tenant.
Okay. And so through our documentation, you've mentioned this and I've mentioned it as well. Did you do an adjustment for the market rent showing that 43% of the leasable area was built after 2008?
Again, I based it on the average ages of the building.
Okay. So there was no adjustment made for the newer aspects of the building that were built higher efficiency, higher qualities, better heating.
No, again, because the buyer is dealing with both. They're dealing with the old, they're dealing with the new, and they're in their mind saying, well, on average, what is this thing? How old on average is it? Sure, it's got some newer space, but it's one facility.
Yep. Okay. Did you do any adjustments on the cap rate because the subject property is significantly smaller than I just need to revote. Yeah. Did you do an adjustment on the cap rates at all because the building is a bit smaller than other ones that were referenced in your brief?
No, the building is anything above about 200,000, 300,000 square feet is a large building for Winnipeg. There might be a slight adjustment in cap rate, but again, it's as much dependent on the specifics of that property as anything. We've got a very cut up property, which is very problematic, and would command a higher cap rate because of it. It's not a clean nice, clean warehouse that we're dealing with. It's a difficult property to lease. There's a lot more risk in leasing it because of the nature of the space and how it was built. Just like your Mission Street might have a slightly higher cap rate because it's got the very old and it's got the very new.
Were you? It's in my brief, but were you aware of the rent that was used in for the COA that was signed in 2006?
Sorry, I missed what you said.
So in 2006, there was a municipal board certificate of agreement signed. Are you familiar with the rent used for that certificate of agreement?
For which property?
For your property in 2006.
I'm sure I'm aware of it. 2006 was
it's on page 48 of my brief because you had mentioned older.
Mr. Merrick, Mr. Froelich, we haven't seen your brief, so if you could refrain and maybe raise that when you're presenting your evidence.
No problem.
Thank you.
That's fair comment. There was a sale in March of 2009 in 2018. Is there any reason why you excluded that sale in your presentation?
A sale in when?
In March of 2018 for the subject for the property on 1 Warham Road. Is there any reason why you excluded that in your?
Well, it's post-reference, and I didn't have the particulars, and it wasn't listed on the market, so it's not really an arm's length sale. Well,
it was different buyers and sellers.
Yeah, but it was not listed. It was a buyer looking. It wasn't advertised. It was a buyer desperately looking for large space in Winnipeg, and thought this seller may be interested.
So
they were willing to pay a premium, it would appear, for the building. As typically these types of buyers did in all across Canada.
So, but if there are two separate buyers that are buyers and sellers are not related.
Well, but this owner wasn't selling. He could name his price.
Yeah, but would a knowledgeable buyer pay more than what would end up taking place with regards to the building?
Well, if a buyer was desperate for space, they might pay almost anything depending on what they thought they could do. And in this case, you've got a marijuana company desperately looking for space in Winnipeg, just like they were all across Canada. And they overpaid. Their facilities are all going back on the market now that things have settled down, and the big players have established themselves. The other players have taken their losses and are moving on.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Froelich. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
I just have a couple of questions. Thank you. I guess the first one is on your comparables on page 12. And you said you went through the time adjustments. I was having a little trouble with that as well. But I see that there's some, I would call them paired sales or paired rents. Same properties that at least in different.
Yeah, there are a couple of those.
So I see number 8, 770 Pandora.
Right.
But it's only a part of the building, is that correct?
Yeah, Pandora is broken up into, well, it's a number of buildings to begin with, but then some of those buildings in turn are broken up, and the spaces at Pandora can be quite different.
Okay, so 9 and 13 appears to be the entire property, though. Is that correct?
No, they're still both part of the same property.
But to the same area. So
it's the same building. Yeah. I would. Yes, it's the same area that has leased up.
Okay, so in October of 14, it was 345, you adjusted it up to 361. And then in 13, or number 13 is a later lease in January of 15, and it went down to 309. Is that what that is?
Right. Yeah.
$3.
The market is not a perfect market by any chance, and particularly for larger spaces. I think you have to look at the fact that anyone looking to, with a serious offer on a 346,000 square foot space, would consider that offer, because they don't come along all that often. So if it did go down, I guess the owner of the property considered the offer and decided that was the best they were going to do for now.
All right. So I'm just wondering, you said you did your time adjustments on a linear basis. So if the actual space went down in rent, why would you adjust it upwards for time?
Okay. Well, I'm looking at the trend in the market, not the individual properties. And that's the problem with unique properties, is using them for compared sales, is that because the market isn't perfect and because you won't get the perfect buyer every time, it could go down in a rising market, or it could go up in a falling market. But it is not necessarily the norm or the trend. So again, the way I achieved my time adjustment was through a trend line. And if you go back to that chart, and I've forgotten the page it was at, you'll see that the correlation between the trend line and the rents is certainly by no means perfect. It's just showing that the overall trend in the market was upward, and it's showing the amount it was upward by. I was able to determine a formula for that, and the best fit appeared to be a linear formula. It produced the closest correlation on a trend line.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned the sale at Warman simply because it was the same owner as the subject property at the time. And
right, and it was a similar use. There are very few food facilities that sell, and Maple Leaf seems to be one of the chief buyers and sellers of food properties in Winnipeg.
Right, and you used it primarily to extrapolate the rent of $3.14.
Right, again, I was just trying to establish guidelines for where I would expect my rent to be, where I'd expect my overall value to be, based on what I know of both properties. Certainly Warman is a better property in all respects than La Jemaudière.
Yeah.
So it would set an upper limit for both rent and market value per square foot.
Right, so if you look at the market value per square foot, I believe the sale was about $87 a foot.
No, the sale was at $41.98 a square foot.
Was the sale not $5.1 million?
Yeah, and the building area is $121,494.
I'm sorry, I saw $58,559. Was that just a portion of the building?
No. You had a building area of 58,000? Yeah, no, that would be just a portion of the building. I'm not sure where you got that number for, because I don't think the building had ever been divided up or rented.
Okay. I'm not sure. Can you direct me to what page that was? I didn't take note of it when you're discussing the...
Yeah. You're looking for the page that my analysis of that sale was on?
Page 12, Mr. McPherson.
Page 12?
Page 12 of Mr. Bailey's brief.
That's where I got the chart. That's where I got the chart, Mr. Mercury.
Yeah, no, we're looking for
page 11 of the hard copy, Mr. McPherson. So it would be, and you look at the second paragraph, 121,494 square foot.
Thank you. Yes, I show that as page 11 on mine.
Oh, okay.
Yes, page 11, but page 12 of the PDF. I think that's the disconnect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I do see the 121,494.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where I saw that 58.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
And I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Okay. And I have no questions. So Mr. Froelich, you can continue with your presentation now.
Can we actually have a quick break, quick recess?
Sure. We'll have a quick 5-minute recess. Is that good?
Please, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, 5 minutes and then we'll carry on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Froelich, I think we were now with you in the start of your presentation, please.
Just for reference purposes, file number 21465, and we're dealing with 870 Lachimodier. So it's been discussed that the property has been built between 1964 and 2021, and we've agreed to a leasable area of 455,855. When I go through my presentation, just as an overview of this property, two important things to notice here, and it's been discussed. So roughly speaking, and it's going to go a bit lower, but like 250,000 square feet were built before 1994, and 193,000 square feet were built after 2008. So when we're looking at market values and market rents in terms of quality, efficiencies, construction types, the benefits of the newer building should be accounted for in the valuation process for this property. Another important consideration to look at is that over almost half the property is the ceiling height is 24 feet. Now I'm going to reference page 29 of my brief.
Okay, let us just get there.
No problem. Just because I had all the non-compliance stuff before that, right? So.
Okay.
Page 29 just shows a general overview where the property is located at. It's located in the southeast quadrant of the city of Winnipeg. Major thoroughfares in terms of Lachimodier Boulevard, Highway 59, easy access to the perimeter, close to the St. Boniface Industrial Park. Page 30 has some exterior pictures of the property, and 31, just a basic overview of what the building looks like, what had taken place with regards to the construction that had occurred. And Robert had mentioned this before on page 32. The 2016 picture I have on page 32 shows the picture before the construction. And on page 33 shows where the new construction took place. So as you can see by the new building that's with the white roof, all the various HVAC components that are listed on that property for the property. From previous briefs, because of COVID and a variety of other reasons, it was when we entered this property into the role, these are pictures that were from 2014, just, showing the high ceiling heights, the hanging rack manufacturing that they have here. The cleanliness. We've talked about the cleanliness. So usually when you go a quality building, when buildings are usually very clean, many health inspectors are there to maintain the quality of the work. That's telling us that this building is in fine condition, and that would be very appealing to a potential buyer. And just a couple more pictures on page 36. So what I've done here in my valuation process for this property is, roughly speaking, we had 73,000 square foot addition that had taken place. The total permit value from 2019 is 21,576,000. So that's a significant amount of money. And so when we were looking at the improvements that have taken place, the additional square footage, like since 2020 and 2001, we're just under 100,000 square feet of new space. So that needs to be accounted for in terms of overall market value, in terms of the property. We understand the building, the limitations of the building, but the quality needs to be accounted for in one way or form, because if we're comparing even a 1990 building to something that was built in 2021, that's 30 years difference in terms of effective age. So when we talk about like cap rates, for example, a 30-year difference in a building would impact the cap rates. You see this in our modeling studies. Continuing on page 37 and on 38, just showing you the values of the $2 million permit, the $18.3 million permit, and the $4.5 million permit that had taken place. Page 39 shows the Maple Leaf Opening Center of Excellence, what they had done in terms of they received a brand new building. They state that it's $182 million for a vacant center of excellence. However, the assessed value for this property is $15 million only. To me, that seems like a bit of a disconnect in terms of PR promotion on one side and market value on the other. So there are just some details with regards to the vision of Maple Leaf, with regards to the quality, the number of jobs that were taking place, and what sort of building that would take place, and just the different vacant brands that exist. Page 40 is a continuation of that. Brings 350 jobs, and because jobs are important for the local economy, you know, the government provides jobs because we want to expand the tax base. We want Winnipeg to grow and prosper. And so the province of Manitoba provided a $1.9 million industry expansion to support the creation of these new jobs. So this is what the province of Manitoba did to encourage this. And however, Maple Leaf has a different view with regards to corporate responsibility, I guess, maybe. Page 41 shows just the continuation of that. So what we've done here in terms of market valuation, and I've already shared this with her already, because on page 43, but here's the updated version of the valuation that I want to present. So using 445,855 square feet, the market rent that we've presided, you don't have this, Linda, I think. Okay. Because this is my rec. This is the rec that I initiated beginning with. So this is why I'm giving you the details for you to write down. Okay. So it's 445,855. 855 or 885? 855. 855. That's the area that the applicants have used.
Excuse me.
885.
Yeah.
885 is where.
855.
Okay, we have 885.
Is that okay? Or is there a good? Can I continue?
Well, we just have a different number than you on the square feet.
Okay, let me just double check here. On Robert's brief, they have 445,855.
885. I'm looking at the brief.
On page 7.
On page 17 of the electronic copy in front of us.
I'm looking at Robert's brief on page 7, and they use the square foot area 445,855.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so
2 different numbers. You're right.
Okay. Thank you. So we used
Okay,
a
so
market.
you're using 445,855.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At a market rent of $4.83 which is reflective, and you'll see in my presentation, of a combination of new and old, large size buildings. Vacancy at 5% comes up with an effective market income of $2,045,382.
Repeat that number.
2,045,382.
Mm-hmm.
The expenses allowed are $124,505. To come up with a net operating income of $1,920,877.
1,920,877.
Yep.
Okay.
7.25% cap rate. Come up with a value of $26,495,000 rounded.
Okay, just give me a second.
Yep, of course.
Madam Chair, may I just clarify, it's 2% expenses that the assessor is using?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Owner occupied building.
That's the recommendation you'd like to present?
That's the recommendation
Fuller?
I'm presenting. Yep.
Mr. Mercury and Mr. Bailey, do you have any comments on that?
We're in agreement on the rentable area. We're in significant disagreement with the rent and the cap rate.
Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Froelich, you can continue then.
Thank you. So, when we're looking at this, I've stated before, a significant part of the building's brand new, very clean, health inspectors. What we're looking at here is, I guess we're looking at market rents per se. And I have provided some rebuttal information with regards to market rents, but what I've done into my approach here, I've done it twofold, because we need to be mindful of the fact that 43% of the building was built in 2008. So that's why I included two different sections here. So in my first section, what I've done is I have comparables here on the first properties on Redwood. It's 111,763 square feet. It was the lease at the place was $6.53, and that was signed in 2016. This property is actually currently vacated, and we spoke with the realtor or the agent representing this property, and he says there's a lot of interest for this, and the rent will be higher than that.
Hold on, I'm just going to object here. This is post-reference information. Are we talking about 2018, Mr. Froelich? Or are you talking about 20?
I'm talking about the fact that this is a high-quality building, and at the time, the rent in place was $6.53.
No, you just spoke about talking to an agent listing it for sale. I'm assuming that's this year.
Listing it for lease.
For lease. Well, Madam Chair, that's 4 years post-reference.
Okay, we'll just consider the rent that's been presented in the table, and we won't be looking at anything post-reference.
Not a problem. The second lease that we have in place on QA10, and I just want to reference here, was for 100,000 square feet. The ceiling height was 26 feet, built in 1968 at $5.20. So what we're looking at here is you're noticing a difference in the market rents here per se. So we have two rents here that are 111, 100,000 square feet. The wall height is older, is higher on the older property, 1968, but the rent is north of $5. So what is a rent that we have here? Because I think we have 1989. The applicant has stated 1990 as effective year rent. These are rents that are reflective of newer buildings here. 198 Dawson is something which is a refrigerated property. I'd actually sent this information here, and I actually spoke with the person in charge of that. The person who had completed the mailer was a lady named Teresa Gutierrez from the 2017 mailer. And what has taken place is she did confirm with me that this is 328,431 square feet. The ceiling height is 28 to 32 feet. It is refrigerated. It is temperature controlled. Built in 1979, the market rent here was $8.52. And I've provided that information because I had quickly seen in rebuttal that I was being questioned on my authenticity with regard to that market rent. And what I did send to you is that I have the income and expense mailer right here for 198 Dawson, which I referenced. And so I want to ensure, and I've actually sent a PDF copy of that. 1750 Inkster Boulevard. The lease that we had in place November 1st, 2014, built in 1970, 22 feet, leasable area 134,664, $5.17. The applicant has confirmed that rent is being good. Last lease in place here that we have for Sony is it was a 10-year lease, 228,000 square feet, 34 feet, $4.22. So that's what we're looking at. So then what I've done here, so I've taken some properties here that are larger building spaces, because there's not a marketplace for, no one rents 400,000 square feet. And so what I did here is I've included some rent comparables of newer warehouse spaces, because what we're looking at here is we have 217,000 square feet that was built after 2008. So what I've done here is I want to show what are rental rates that were built in the 2000s, what are they renting for? Just to sort of have a big picture perspective on this, because for me, $3.11 is not being fair. So what we're looking at here, and I've confirmed all these, I've researched all the income and expense mailers. So a couple properties that were built in St. Boniface Industrial Park, 2005 lease, 18 years, 136,000 square feet. Wall height, 27 feet, 2001, 791. 310 Debates, 2010 lease, 12 years, smaller, 51,000 square feet, 820. So these are smaller, but the point is, what I want to represent here is these are newer spaces, and there has to be a premium placed on the market rent for all this new work that's been taking place for this building here. You can't use a dated lease from 2010 to be representative of market from 2018, no matter what sort of linear adjustments or size adjustments you make. 200 Discovery, Northwest Quadrant, bit smaller, 28 wall feet, 870, 985. 350 Debates, 60,000 square feet, 28 feet, 750, 60,000 square feet. And 195 Haggard, brand new building, similar to what's the expansion that has taken place. It's north of $10. So when we're looking,
Madam Chair, I'm going to object here. This is obviously post-reference information. There should be no regard to this comparable.
Thank you.
What's taking place, though, is this is an indication of.
Mr. Froelich, you won't speak to 195 Haggard, okay? It's clearly post-reference.
Okay. So what I've done here is that when we're looking at these properties here, we've stated that 193,000 square feet was built after 2008, right? And so what we're looking at here is that there has to be a premium placed on 193,000 square feet. And so I know with confidence it's not $3.11. And the information that I presented here shows that. On page 45, what we have here is we have a 2006 municipal board order that had taken place for this property. Same property owner, Maple Leaf Foods. And the workup that had taken place. So this is a 2006 assessment appeal. The value that we had on it was $8.2 million. And the breakdown for that is on page 48. And what's interesting is because they did it differently, like as valuation changes and there's different theories that take place, they had broken down the valuation process into different levels, right? So if you look at the processing facility of 205,016 square feet, they used a market rent of 2,087. So if it's a 2006 appeal, 4 years is 2004. So this is a 2003 rent, which is 15 years after the reference that we're using today. The storage for the building was $2 rent. And what's interesting here is we have 58,559 square feet at $7.40. This space here is where the 36 feet ceiling place is located at. So when I look at the ceiling height of this property here, which is 36 feet, that section was built in 1994. And so they're using 740, which is more than twice the rental rate used by the applicant today. And the rest of the valuation goes as forward. So the total square footage of the property at the time was, let me just take a quick look here. Was 266,611. And the person who was a part of this was Mr. Bailey and Mr. Mercury. That were a part of it in one way, shape, or another. Their names are crossed out here, or Jamie's name's there, but Mr. Bailey's not. So the blended rate used for this property was $3.85, with a valuation date of 2001. What's also interesting here that I have is there's a 2016 VA hearing that had taken place, and I just want to make sure that before I go any further. So there was a VA hearing that had taken place on file number, 155610. 2016, Mr. Mercury was a part of this hearing, and so the VA value went from $2,649,000 to $2,106,000, but the order said, based on the evidence presented by the applicant at a $4 based annual rental rate and parameters assessed by the taxation department. So in 2006, we have a $4 agreement taking place here, and the applicant's using $3.11. So I see a bit of a disconnect there. So the reason why I do this is because I want to be fair and equitable and consistent with regards to market valuation. So what I've done on page 49 here, and Mr. Mercury and I had significant discussions with regard to this. So what I've done here is when the property sold on page 49, the assessment value or the sold price was $7.9 million, which worked out to $29 a square foot. And then I just show the annual history here. So in 2006, it was $30. The value in 2010 was at just under $38. So we know that the building's getting nicer, it's improving. We know that the marketplace is improving and nothing's gone down in value. And that just shows the history here. And 2014, the value worked out to $46.61 a square foot. In 2016, the 2017 reduction value worked out to $43.28 a square foot. Yes, the parameters are different, but a $4 market rent was used in 2017 because we got the VA for it that I referenced here today. 2018 model value was not appealed. I could only speculate that maybe on why Maple Leaf did not contact Mr. Bailey to deal with this. 2020, we're looking at a value of $50.32 a square foot. And right now, my recommended value is, I do believe it's, the recommended value right now is, no, that's just, I just did it here. Just bear with me here for 1 sec here. 26. works out to 59.42, which seems a bit odd, but I know something's fishy there. So that's what we're yeah. Oh, because I understand what happened here, that the square footage went down, the value went down, and the square footage went down. So that's what we're looking at here right now in terms of the history of the property value. So we're looking at all the improvements that have taken place. There's value in this. There's value in this property. This property has not gone down in value. So then what I've done here is I've looked at the marketplace. So I'm referencing the Johnson report here, looking at the valuation process in 2017. And at the end of 2017, the average sale per square foot was $79 a square foot. We're nowhere near that. And that deals with the whole wide parameters of property sales that have taken place here. So if we want to get to a value which is close to the value that the applicant's seeking today on a per square foot value, on the next page, you'd have to reference values that were in approximately 2006 at $33 a square foot. We know things have changed since then. So what we have here is when we're looking at capitalization rates, we've talked about this, we would all sort of confirm that this property would be industrial B, industrial B. So the range for the city of Winnipeg parameters was 6.34 to 7.8%. So what we're looking at here is, though, it's not the worst property at all. It's not an industrial warehouse space that was built in the 1950s. We got a significant portion of it that was built, like 43%, that was built after 2008. So when we're looking at a 7.25% cap rate, I feel it's very reasonable. That concludes my formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Froelich. Mr. Mercury, Mr. Bailey, do you have any questions of the assessor?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Your original assessment at $18,300,000, Mr. Froelich, what rent did you use to arrive at that number?
The rent that we used for the $19 million or the?
No, $18,300,000, the original before the supplementals were issued. What rent were you using?
I would have to double check, but I'm sure you have it in front of you.
My understanding, it's $4.12. Is that correct?
That actually is correct. Yes.
And so the building is now larger, significant, by the amount that we've seen, and notwithstanding the increase in space, you have now, your current rent is $4.83, correct?
That is correct, but
your justification for that was that
I am referencing that when I look at the valuation of the property, there's always a new set of eyes. There's right now there is 5 of us here, six of us here. And when we come to looking at the market valuation of a property, we all have a different opinion of the value. So I'm not referencing, even though we had used $4.12, I believe that's undervalued.
You didn't appeal the assessor didn't appeal its own assessment, did it?
To the municipal board? No, because
board of revision.
The board of revision?
Yes. You say there was a mistake made?
What I'm saying though is when a new set of eyes looks at this property, we came up with a new valuation process.
All right.
Which happens every assessment cycle.
Okay. I'd like to look at your rental comparables, Mr. Froelich.
Yep.
First of all, before we get to the specific comps, you're not disputing that this building is irregular shaped, correct?
Correct.
Or series of buildings, I should say. You won't see anything quite like this in the Winnipeg marketplace, will you?
With a U shape?
Yes.
Not that I could think of off the top of my head.
And when we're talking about an ideal industrial warehouse building for lease for sale, what would your ideal configuration be?
The ideal configuration would not be the subject property.
Well, what would it be?
It would either be a square or a rectangle.
Okay. In fact, and we'll go to most of the comparables that you have. You typically see those squares or rectangles in the industrial marketplace, and certainly in the city of Winnipeg, correct?
Yeah, but older buildings will have different configurations.
They will have some add-ons, but typically they will not be configured in the manner that the subject is, which is essentially a U-shaped flow pattern, correct?
I think to answer your question though, as it is a U-shape here today, and because this property has gone through major configurations since its existence in 1964, I think what happened is that they could actually make this into a square or a rectangle by building across the subject property. Anything's possible. And so that would take away from the fact that it's no longer a U, because they've done so many add-ons. Who's to say that a potential buyer would not use this as a warehouse facility and do an add-on and do a new building construction to make it a square or a rectangle?
Correct. In fact, I think everyone's in agreement that anything is possible, but you would agree that a potential buyer, if they were contemplating that, would be looking at very significant capital costs to do that, correct? And they would factor that into the purchase price.
Well, yeah, but I would disagree with that, because if a person wants to build something in a certain area, they'll deal with the cost of buying a certain property, and they would have to look at the advantages of this property here. This property is on a major thoroughfare. It's not located in an industrial park where access is a huge issue. So with regards to the U-shapedness of this property, this property is the configurations, they've added 193,000 square feet since 2008. So if they've done that, let me finish here, Mr. Mercury here. Right. So if they've done that, who's to say, and I could do the measurement right now, that they add another 50, 60,000 square feet, make the ceiling height the same as the new building addition that has just been added on, to make this a more user-friendly building for other purposes.
All right, so are you suggesting then, just to simplify this back to my initial question, you're not suggesting, Mr. Froelich, that the current configuration is equivalent to what you would describe or did describe as an ideal facility, that being a square or rectangle, are you?
In its current shape? In its current shape?
Yes, the current physical asset.
The current shape, but the point is the current owner has been motivated to add 139,000 square feet to the subject property, which is like 40,000 square feet, 40% of the building. So I think it could be in the realm of possibilities that moving forward here, we don't know what else Maple Leaf has planned.
That wasn't my question, but we'll move on. In terms of maintenance costs, Mr. Froelich, would you not expect the maintenance costs to be more significant in a irregular shaped building than they would on a rectangle?
I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in that, so I can't really comment.
All right. And you'll agree that there were 21 different phases of construction on this building, correct?
The roof lines would show that, yes.
Right. That is very much atypical in the Winnipeg marketplace, correct?
Older buildings will, you know what? There are a lot of old buildings within the city of Winnipeg marketplace that have different roof lines.
Okay. Are you able to point to any of them that come anywhere close to 21 different construction phases?
Well, this property is an outlier. So, on a per capita basis, there are buildings that are 10,000 square feet that have, 4 different roof lines on it. So if we did it on a per capita basis, the point is, when you're looking at the 21 different sections of the area, where are there's areas where there's similarities? So when I look at the building plans here, we have essentially three ceiling heights. We have ceiling heights for the majority of the building at 17 feet, 24 feet, and 36 feet. When I did my overview. So to say that, you know, there's 11 different buildings, yes, but where are the ceiling heights consistency on? So, you know, all these additions were added on for a reason on that. And so, you know.
The average ceiling height is about 22 feet.
Well, I've stated in the background before in my analysis, 252,000 were built between 1994 and 193 was at was built after 2008.
Mr. Froelich, if this property, you would agree that the exercise today is not the value to make leave, but it's a market value, correct? You understand the difference?
I understand the difference, but I also understand that there are three approaches to value when dealing with properties, and so you got to consider the costs that were incorporated into the property as well.
Have you done a cost approach, Mr. Froelich, a full cost approach? Are you presenting one?
What I do at most hearings when I'm dealing with unique properties, the same thing with car dealerships, is like we'll deal with the income approach to value. But when I look at the cost approach, I am mindful of the fact that if we did this on cost and factoring the depreciation, and this is just Marshall Smith, and I'm no expert on this per se, we're within the ballpark of the value that I've presented here today.
Well, but in fairness, Mr. Froelich, you have not presented a cost approach at all, correct?
No, but what I have done is when I ran the cost. What I have done. Pardon me?
Are you able to define the cost approach or the various elements of the cost approach? And have you done that in your brief?
We value properties, like I've stated before. We value properties based on the income approach to value following the legislation. However, as a checks and balance with regards to our market valuation, trying to be fair and equitable, are we being reasonable in our approach to value? So we look at sales, and you've looked at sales as well. There's different theories with regards to what you believe the sale price should be, what I should believe the sale price should be. And there's also the cost approach. So I am comfortable with regards to looking at the cost approach. I am comfortable with regards to looking at what the sales are for industrial properties within the city of Winnipeg. And I am comfortable with the market value that I've presented here on the income approach.
I just want to be clear on one point. You have not used a cost approach to value this property. You've looked at some permit values, granted, but you've not used a cost approach to value. You will agree with me, correct?
I think I've answered that question, Lady Chairperson.
You haven't.
Chairperson.
Is the answer yes or no? I guess is the question. Are you suggesting that you've used a cost approach to value, Mr. Froelich?
I am suggesting that I looked at all approaches to value to defend the value here today.
Have you looked at economic or functional obsolescence, Mr. Froelich?
When you do the cost approach to value, you factor that in.
Okay, and that's not in your brief, is it?
No, because we value properties on income.
All right, you've used an income approach.
That is correct.
All right, so in this Winnipeg market, you've indicated your evidence was nobody rents 400,000 square feet.
That's correct.
Okay, you stated that. So if nobody rents 400,000 square feet in the city of Winnipeg anyway, who's your buyer for this building, or who is your tenant, prospective tenant?
Well, it's almost equivalent to who can afford to buy a $2.5 million home and who can afford to buy a $300,000 home. The marketplaces are different. And so based on economies of scale, you know, and I've showed this with regards to the rent comparables that I've used, we're dealing with a building here where 43% of it was built after 2008. And the market rent that I'm using reflects that aspect of it.
My question was, who is your prospective tenant?
I don't know who the prospective buyer is, because I don't know who's, no one knew that Amazon was a prospective buyer in the Winnipeg marketplace 5 years ago. And look what they've purchased and look what they have done to large industrial properties within the city of Winnipeg.
What I will suggest to you, Mr. Froelich, is that your prospective buyer in this circumstance would be extremely limited. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. It's just like the potential buyer of a home for $2.5 million would be extremely limited as well. But like I said here, no one could foresee the future. No one foreshadowed. So when we were dealing with the 2020 appeal period, no one foreshadowed Amazon's impact to the Winnipeg marketplace with regards to properties that they're leasing and properties that they're buying.
Okay, fair enough, Mr. Fuller. You're not suggesting that this property in its current configuration could be multi-tenanted, are you?
You know what? Every buyer is motivated by different things.
Well, I'm asking your opinion, Mr. Phillip.
I'm not an expert in that matter. What I do know is what I am trying to come up with a market value that is fair. I don't know who's looking for potential developments within the city of Winnipeg who may be interested. And at the end of the day, Maple Leaf has paid a significant amount of money for this property. If they didn't believe that there was any value to doing this, maybe they would have considered to moving to a different location.
Mr. Froelich, it was actually a very simple question. I'd like to know your opinion as to whether or not you agree or disagree with Mr. Bailey's. Mr. Bailey's position is that this is not conducive to a multi-tenancy. Do you agree or disagree with him without investing a significant amount of money into this property?
You know what? I can't comment on something that I don't know what's taking place. Like, for example, I referenced 680 Mission. No one had foreseen the possibility where that property was a 5-tenant, 135,000 square foot space becoming a single tenant occupancy. So I can't, you know what? It all depends what the marketplace dictates.
680 Mission, is that a U-shaped property? I'm pulling it up on my screen right now as I'm looking at the Google Earth view. I can actually share my screen if you like, but is that in any way, shape, or form comparable to?
I think I've addressed that answer with regards to making that the subject property could become with an expansion could no longer be a U-shaped property.
And do you know why then the Maple Leaf, the current owner, did not in fact reconfigure the whole plant to make it a rectangle?
Well, because they based it on their operational needs.
And I would suggest they would have based it on cost, would they not?
I'm not exposed to what takes place in the Maple Leaf boardroom.
All right. So, Mr. Froelich, looking to your rent comparables now, which are found at page 44, I believe.
Yep.
1345 Redwood. This facility is occupied by Boeing. Is that right?
At the time, it was, yes.
At the time, it was, and are you not aware of the significant work that the landlord performed on this building on behalf of the tenant?
Well, they made it a temperature-controlled environment similar to the subject property.
You're not aware of the amount of money spent by the landlord to induce Boeing to take this space?
I could reference the permits, but I do not know.
Okay, and you're also aware that this property has been under appeal a number of times in the past, correct?
Yep.
And you are aware that historically, anyway, the board has not utilized that rent that you see in place, correct?
I've never taken this property on appeal. I haven't done the research for it, so I can't really comment on that.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on. First of all, that building, though, is essentially a rectangle on
That's
Redwood.
correct. Yep.
Okay, it's actually a good location in terms of industrial warehouse. It's being used for manufacturing process, but good location.
I would say it's an inferior location to the subject property.
It suits Boeing's needs.
It does suit Boeing's needs.
879 Q8. You stated in your evidence a little bit later on that you don't think it's reliable to use 10-year-old leases, and you don't think that's helpful.
Well,
you have a lease from July of 2009 for $5.20. You're suggesting that this is helpful?
Well, the point is, it's a challenge to find large leases. And what I've done here is with my large comparable leases, I haven't reused leases over and over again. I used 5 separate properties, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate properties that are north of 100,000 square feet. And usually what takes place is that leases that are, leases usually go up in value. They don't go down in value. There are situations that do take place, but as a general rule, usually lease rental rates go up.
Right. But Mr. Kroluk, you'll have to agree that you have to look very carefully at the building itself, the location, and the particular facts that went into negotiating that lease. You will agree?
The one on Q8?
Yes. Well, all of your comparables.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is, so if we're doing comparables here, I would say that the Q8 property and the Inkster property, similar to the Maple Leaf property, are in a superior location to the other comparables that I have.
879 Q8 is essentially a square building, correct?
We're just talking about it is, but what I'm talking about is location adjustments in terms of the location of the property. All these buildings are square. Okay.
Except for the subject, it certainly is not, correct?
All my comparables are square.
Yes, and the ceiling height would be superior to the subject at 26 feet, correct?
Well, we have I think we have almost 100,000 square feet. That is, well, we know for a fact we have some ceiling heights that are 36 feet, and we have some that are 29 feet for the subject property.
So, Mr. Kroluk, you've seen Mr. Bailey's brief and his comparables, correct? You have that document available?
Yeah, it was on page 12 that we've discussed, yes.
Page 12, and he has 18 different rents. You would have access to all of these rents, correct?
I think those issues will be addressed in my rebuttal presentation.
All right. Well, we'll get to those. But you would have access to all of them, correct?
Yeah, and I found many discrepancies in them. And during my discrepancies, I believe that based on the analysis that was done, it led to an accurate reflection of market rents. And Mr. Bailey had showed that with the one comparable that he had a rent of $3.35, where it was actually $5.19.
Well,
1750 Inkster.
I'll suggest to you that I'll show you the assessor's own briefs that have $3.35. So
I understand that perspective, but what happens is there's a lot of inconsistency in the mailers that take place. And, based on how the deadlines of the appeal season, I've confirmed all the rents. I've done them visually. I'm under oath. And I have no control over what other assessors done. And in fairness, I may present a market rent in a brief that may be lower than actuals just because of deadlines and other factors to consider. So what we're looking at here is we don't compare assessments. We're looking at market rents. So I'm showing market rents here that I feel that are reflective of market conditions that are vastly different than the information presented by the applicant. And I'm comfortable with regard to that, and I'm going to address that in my rebuttal.
Well, I'm going to suggest to you, Mr. Kroluk, that your rents are anything but that. And I'm going to refer to 198 Dawson Road. You're aware that this is a sale leaseback situation?
I am aware of that, yeah.
Okay, and you didn't think it was important to report that to the board?
So what happened here, that was a sales leaseback situation. But when I spoke with Teresa Gutierrez about that, she had told me that was the lease that was in place for this property. So I provided that information to you. There's a reference point that you could follow up with, and she said that in conversation. So I've done my due diligence on my part.
That's the lease that's in place, but it's based on a sale leaseback.
Yeah, but it's a sales leaseback that also has, in fact, that it's a high quality property that's temperature controlled, and it's 328,000 square feet. And when it comes to the leaseback of that property, it wasn't clean. Like if I could have used that as a sale, I would have used that as a sale. But this is the information that was provided to me, and I confirmed that by following up on the income and expense mailer with the contact person.
This is 85% freezer warehouse space, correct?
It's temperature controlled, similar to the subject property.
Okay. Are you suggesting that a traditional cold storage facility warehouse, which is a square rectangle, is analogous to a U-shaped processing facility that has temperature controlled for manufacturing process? You're saying those are the one and the same thing?
Well, what I'm saying though is that the rent for the cold storage facility is $8.52, and I'm under $5 a square foot at $4.87.
Okay, and
so there's a difference there in market rent, and there's the adjustment that's taking place for it.
And if I were to suggest to you, Mr. Froelich, that in the business assessment for this property, you're using something close to $5 rent, would that surprise you?
For the business assessment?
Yes.
Does that include occupancy costs?
$5 rent.
Well, if we use the $5 rent for the subject property, I'm not asking for a $5 rent. I'm asking for a rent of $4.83. You're asking for $3.09.
Well, I'm talking about Dawson Road.
Okay, so the Dawson Road lease that we have access to states $8.52.
And I'm looking at the business assessment.
Yeah, well, business assessments based on a decision that happened at the municipal board. We have no control. I mean, the board of revision. So, as a matter of protocol, whatever value, and you know this, Mr. Mercury, whatever value is established at the realty. So, in 2016, the realty value for the property was $4 a square foot. We followed that in 2016 at $4 a square foot. So in the appeal for 198 Dawson, if they had a $5 rent, it's not necessarily a rent that we agreed with, but we wanted to be consistent in our approach and follow protocol, and we followed the realty decision for BA.
Well, and I have a problem with this, Mr. Froelich, because with your comment, you're trying to be fair and equitable. And you're suggesting you are following a board order, which you haven't disclosed to the board. And
I've referenced the file number.
Well, Mr. Froelich, I'm going to suggest to you that's misleading. You are reporting an $8.52 rent, and you know for a fact that this board does not agree that that's market rent for this property.
We base our data, our information on the income expense mailers that we get from the property owners, right? And so we didn't use $8.52. It's just like we have tax agents that come in and they'll argue, we'll have a lease in place for $20. We'll ask for 16, but they'll argue 13.
All right, I'll leave it at that, Mr. Froelich. 1750 Inkster Boulevard, you're reporting a rent at $5.17. And Mr. Bailey has reported rents in the $3 range, which have been used by the assessor at prior hearings. You're aware of that?
Like I said, I'm presenting information that will be my rebuttal. And I can't control what other assessors do. And the information is presented at the time may be correct, may not be correct. And so I actually have the income and expense, the 2017, let me look at it here. So it is comparable 10. And I don't have it marked, unfortunately, but in comparable 10 that we have the rental rate of $5.25 on 41,000 square feet. And then it changed again. Just what happened here? Oh yeah, I included and so in comparable 10 of my rebuttal brief, applicant shows $3.35 with an inflation factor of $3.51. Actual lease, not including the free rent, was $5.25 by the smaller space. There was no lease in place for 196,000 square feet that started in 2014. But there was a lease in place at 2015 for 182. And that is, and that's what I referenced at the same rental rate, I do believe.
Right, Mr. Furlick, I just want to move on in the interest of time here. 1370 Sony is a 2008 lease, is that correct?
That's correct.
This, again, quite a dated lease. This is a Brewers Retail is in there, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, this is in no way, shape, or form similar to the subject property, is it?
No, but it's not a temperature-controlled environment, so there needs to be a premium placed on a temperature-controlled environment.
And this is cold storage space is what we're talking about.
Well, you stated it's a brewer's distributor.
Right, and this is an artistry building, as far as you're aware?
Yep.
At $4.22.
Yep.
And this is an average, the estimated year built 1988, with average wall height of 34 feet, which would be significantly greater than the average wall height in the subject, correct?
Yes. Okay,
and then the newer warehouse space, you will agree, and I don't want to spend much time on this, but Mr. Fuller, most of these, we'll ignore the last one, are significantly smaller than the subject property, correct?
Yeah, but the rents are significantly higher than the subject property. And I'm mindful of the fact that
I understand that.
Yeah, and I'm mindful of that. So, all I'm saying is that if you had a lent or leasable space of 193,000 square feet that was built in 2000, it wouldn't be renting for $3.11.
But Mr. Froelich, you're assuming that you could multi-tenant that new space. Are you? I want to be very fair to you on this. Are you suggesting that this owner, if they wish to vacate the building and lease it out, that they would have the ability, as currently configured in its current physical condition, to lease out the 2021 addition space independently of the rest of the building?
Probably not.
Okay, thank you.
But I also am mindful of the fact that the owner spent $21 million on addition of just under 100,000 square feet, and that has to be factored into the market rent as well.
And you would agree that that money would have been spent to support its business operation in the building, correct?
And the overall market value of the subject property.
It would have spent the money to affect the market value?
When they spent that money, it would naturally, when they would add 100,000 square feet to the building, they'd be mindful of the fact that it would increase the value of their assessment, right, of the market value of the property.
You also mentioned you talked about historical board orders and certificates of agreement. I don't want to spend much time on that, Mr. Fulop, but you will agree that the task of the board here is not to look at what happened in 2004 or 2006, but it's to examine the current market data, if using an income approach, to examine what probable rent and what the appropriate cap rate would be, correct? In the year 2018. And
I've provided that information.
Okay.
It's just like referencing the cost approach, Jamie. We look at all factors that take place. We look at the historical values of the properties. We look at what average properties are selling per square foot. we're not dissecting one aspect of valuation, creating a value that is superficially low.
All right. You're familiar with the property at 99 Murray Park Road, Mr. Froelich?
Yes, I am.
Who owns that building?
Boeing.
Boeing. And in fact, in this cycle, you were the assessor who handled the appeal before the Board of Revision on that property, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, that's referenced in Mr. Bailey's material, which we'll come to.
Yes.
Okay. That building was originally assessed at approximately $27 million, correct? And that building is more of a traditional rectangular layout than what we see with subject property, correct?
Yeah, but the building's similar to the subject property, that it has 11 different sections in it, and their ceiling heights vary from 8 feet to 30 feet. And it's significantly larger than the subject property, but the areas of configuration in the building records for that, it's 8 feet big, 18, 10, 9, 12, 30, 24, and 25. So actually, in that regards, the building configuration of that is, even though it's rectangular, the building heights are different.
I wasn't asking about the building heights, Mr. Froelich. I'm looking right now on my screen at the building configuration. It's essentially a square rectangle with a recent addition on it, correct?
Yes, the last addition was in 2012, I believe.
No, I believe it was 2019, Mr. Froelich.
Okay, but what we've done with the records here.
Okay.
We made the effective age.
In fact, they added on, you're aware, you did the assessment on this, well over 100,000 square feet to that building, which resulted in an assessment of approximately $27 million. You're familiar with this?
Yeah, for sure. You and I have discussed it before.
665,000 square feet.
Yep.
Your rent for that building, including over 100,000 brand new square feet, was just over $3, correct?
Yes, but I do believe in the lady chairperson said we're not here to compare assessments. We're here to establish market value for this property.
I'm asking about your approach to the income approach. You are suggesting in the same cycle that a manufacturing facility, which has a superior layout with over 100,000 square feet of new space, has a rent of approximately $3.
That's what we had used, correct?
Right. And you're aware that the board adopted that your net operating income with a 7.5% cap rate, correct? This is a board order. This is not an assessment. This is a board order. You're aware of that?
I am well aware of that, but...
and so you're suggesting, notwithstanding using a $3 rent for 99 Murray Park Road, which is in an industrial park, that the subject property, which is in the configuration that it is going to command a rent over $4.60. Does that make any sense to you, Mr. Fuller?
What makes sense to me is that the Boeing property is under assessed. That's what I fundamentally believe in. Because if it's a rectangular property, and the point is, if we change, I don't agree with the rental rate that was used for that property.
This was your rate, Mr. Fuller. This
was the rate that the department had brought up in 2020. This is the value that was determined. I took that property on appeal. I was at the time when the 2020 values were established. I didn't review that property.
You testified at the Board of Revision hearing. So I want to be fair, because Mr. Froelich is digging into 2006 valuations. We're talking about the 2018 reference date for industrial properties. And Mr. Froelich is saying he wants to be fair and equitable. And Mr. Froelich has testified, this board has heard that evidence under oath that it's $3. And yours, and this is a significant issue for my client. And today, because there happened to be a new addition on the property, the city assessment department issues a supplemental assessment for this building at a rent which is nowhere close to what Mr. Froelich has presented. And Mr. Froelich, if you're suggesting this is just what the department told you to do, that's one thing. But I'm going to suggest to you that the information you're presenting today is fundamentally at odds with what you have presented in the same cycle before the same board. Correct?
No, I disagree with that comment completely. I agree with the $3.08. I also agree, and I presented information that in 2016 for the subject property, the BA, the rental used for business assessment was $4. And I'm referencing that as well. So if you're going to discuss one aspect, we also got to look at the other aspect. And since that period of time, a significant portion of the building has improved and has added in value. And so, we use $3.08 for 99 Murray Park Road. I agree, I understand. But what I'm also looking at here is I'm looking at the assessments that were used for previous years for this subject property. And, you could have appealed the business assessment to the municipal board at $4 in 2016 if you felt that it was too high.
Okay, can I just get this back on track? Let's focus on the property at hand, not Murray Park. I take Mr. Mercury's comment about, the comparable rent that was being used in that property. I appreciate that. But I don't want to focus on processes and appeals of that property. Can we get it back on track?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, very much. The reason for Murray Park, as it is in Mr. Bailey's rebuttal brief, will be speaking to it, and I want to be fair to Mr. Froelich as well, because what you will see, what he has done is he's essentially used many of the same rents he used the same rent comps in Murray Park, but acknowledge that for a building of this size, you don't use those rents. You have to adjust down significantly, and so it is an important point. And there's also, it's not just an assessment; it is a board order. And I think this board has to be mindful of consistency in the process. So we will move past that. I just want to touch finally on the cap rate.
Can I respond to that, please?
Go ahead.
If you're starting with wrong data from the get-go, it will lead into a wrong data moving forward. And so in my rebuttal evidence, I'll show the discrepancies that have taken place there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mercury?
Right, so on the capitalization rate, you're suggesting a cap rate of 7. Well, actually, just before I leave the rents, you have not done any time adjustments or size adjustments in your brief, as Mr. Bailey has, have you?
No, we have not.
Okay, so we can't actually see how you arrive at the specific rent of $4 and
83 cents.
Thank you. $4.83. You're not showing that anywhere in particular.
No, but what I am showing is that for newer properties, what they're leasing for, and doing a negative adjustment from there.
All right, but you haven't. My point is, you haven't shown that work anywhere.
No, but I've explained it at the hearing. All right.
This is your subjective, or is this a model-driven evaluation rent?
It is subjective.
This is your subjective value. Okay. Yeah. And on the cap rate, Mr. Froelich, I don't want to spend much time on that, but you're not relying on any specific sales, are you? You are using, this is a judgment call, I take it on your part, to use a 7.25% based on the parameters?
Yes.
And I want to correct one thing. You stated at page 52 of your brief that the cap rates, industrial B buildings ranged from 6.34 to 7.8. In fact, they ranged from 5.5 to 9.8. You were referencing the 20th percentile and the 80th percentile, correct?
I did reference the 80th percentiles, yep. That's
Okay,
correct.
but they went as high as 9.8.
Yep, that's correct.
All right. And then you also referenced the Johnson report and talked about the price per square foot, the average selling price per square foot.
Yep.
All that. This will include all industrial buildings. I'm looking at page 50.
This will include all industrial buildings presented by the Johnson report.
So of various square footages, correct?
Various square footages, yep.
So the vast majority of those sales will come nowhere close to the 445,000 square feet that we are talking about here.
Yeah, but the average is $30 and we're significantly less than that. The average is $80 and we're $30 less on a per square foot basis.
Well, but you're not even, you didn't comment at all about economies of scale. You will acknowledge, Mr. Phillip, there are economies of scale.
Yes, there are economies of scale.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillip. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mercury. Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions?
Just one. Mr. Mercury asked you if the 483 was model driven or whether it was subjective. And by that, I'm assuming that when you said subjective, that's a rent that, how did you arrive at that?
No, I apologize. Maybe I misinterpreted. That was a model driven rent. The 483 was a model driven rent. So if I answered that incorrectly, I apologize.
Okay, and apart from that, the cap rate, the 7.25, that's also a model driven cap rate?
That is a model driven, yep.
So that's based on age, location,
Yep.
size?
Yep.
Okay, and when it goes size, is it just?
It goes, I think, north of 100,000 square feet.
Okay, so north of 100,000 versus 400,000.
Yeah, well, there's not enough sales to do a cap rate on buildings that have sold for 400,000 square feet.
Right. So would you assume like a cap rate is basically reflective of risk?
Yep.
Would you not assume that there would be perhaps more risk in a $400,000 or 400,000 square foot property versus 100?
Oh, I would acknowledge that. And so when Mr. Mercury talked about the cap rate of 7.5% being for the Boeing property, right? The Boeing property is 663,000 square feet. Our subject property is 455,000 square feet. So it's a smaller property. So the risk would drop a little bit because it's a bit smaller.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Questions?
Thank you very much. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I understand there is rebuttal evidence, Mr. Froelich.
Just bear with me here for 1 sec. As you can imagine, lots of paperwork. Does everyone have their rebuttal brief in front of these?
What does it, what's the title?
It looks like
of it
this.
here?
Well, it looks like this per se.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Bear with me I have to look at my email for a moment.
Sorry, this is rebuttal to assessor?
This is the rebuttal brief, my rebuttal brief to the applicant.
All right, I have it.
I'm sorry, I have two files that say, one says rebuttal assessor and the other one says rebuttal to assessor. So
Yeah, I have both as well.
So
I couldn't open one of them, if it
just
helps.
to clarify, this second piece of rebuttal was the income and expense mailer that Merrick had
Oh, okay, yeah, that's,
about 198 Dawson.
yeah,
So I believe he is about to reference the first rebuttal package.
that is correct.
Thank you.
So it's the last one that we're dealing with?
Yeah, it's the one with the cover page like this.
It should be 29 pages.
Yeah, that's great.
I have it, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
So I just want to building areas. So what I've done here is, okay, you know what? Because that issue has been taken care of, we could ignore the first. So we're looking at the section that says rebuttal information, comparables 1, 9, and 13, which would be page 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be 1, 2, 3, which would be on page 4. Is everyone there? It's an income and expense
not yet.
mailer for 770 Pandora Avenue East.
And which page 4?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You said page 4?
It's not listed as page 4, but it says rebuttal information, comparable 1, 9, and 13.
It's the PDF page 4.
Okay, start. Okay. Okay. So the reason why I'm bringing this up here, or I'm going through this process, is that it's important. So there's a detailed analysis done on the rents, but I want to make sure that the information that's presented as evidence is factual and it's confirmed with what we have in our system. I don't know where the applicant has gotten their numbers from or their rents, but this is what we use for our modeling information. So on comparable 1, 9, and 13, the applicant has used one tenant occupying 346,746 square feet. I looked in the 2009, 2010, and 2011 mailers. All these rents are gross, but nowhere on the next page. So I'm looking at the page here right now that shows all the tenants listed from the 12 months ending December 31st, 2009. Is everyone following me?
are you on page 5?
I think so. In hindsight, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4. I am on page 5. Yep. Yeah, because I'm reading the paper copy here. So on the top part of page 5, I have no tenants occupying 346,000 square feet. On the bottom part of page 5, I have no tenants occupying that area. And then what I've done for 2011, I've created they did a PDF, so it's a different sort of version of this. So let me just go here, 2, 5, 6, and 7. On 7, there's area leased. Nowhere on the 2011 mailer on page 7 is there a leasable area of 346,000 square feet. And I just want to reference Robert's brief here, so this way I can talk about it as I present. So just bear with me. So I know it's hard because you're dealing with computer copies here, but this is what I've referenced here off of here. So just finishing up on page 7 in 2011. There's 2010 lease in place, which is comparable number 1 at 346,000 square feet, and nowhere seen on 2009, 10, or 11. I am now on page 8. So what I have here is 2013. It was the first year reported Their tenant occupied at 346,000 square feet. The 2012 mailer showed 223,000 square feet. And then what ended up happening here is then on the next page, I ended up showing up here. So then, and then on the 2015 mailer, it showed 286,000 square feet. So the evidence shows 346,746 square feet in 2013. And I have that, but so I'm wondering where's the contradiction? Because if the original lease was for 5 years, but the applicant shows 3 times it represents market conditions of different leasable rates. So this is important in terms of consistency. So on page 9, I'm showing that the largest lease in place was for 286,000 square feet at the time. Let me get the right page here. So now I'm referencing page 10. And so page 10, I made reference here to comparable 8 and comparable 16. In 2013, the applicant shows a lease in place, but there's no lease for 109,474 square feet. So before I forget the comparables that were used for 1, 9, and 13, the lease in place here is for Cabela's. Is what that's 2016, 2013. So in 2013, it shows for the first time 347,746 square feet. It did not show this in the 2009, 10, 11, 12 mailer, but it did show up in the 2013. So it's about accuracy of information and consistency. So I am acknowledging that there was a lease in place for 346,000 square feet, but it wasn't in place on March 1st, 2010, based on what's been provided to us by the property owner. So now in comparable 8 and comparable 16, the applicant shows a lease in place. So comparable 8 and 16 for 109,474 square feet. And in 16, 109,374. But on the 2013 lease, there is no areas of 109,474. And so it comes to the accuracy of the data. So not knowing where it is, I'm just basing it on what I see in front of me here. In 2016, the applicant shows that same lease, but then to the 2016 mailer, there's no lease in place for 109,474 square feet. Property I'm looking at right now is, let me get the page right. 11, 12. So on page 13, page 12, there's a comparable 3 and comparable 15. There's a 10 or 20-year step-up lease. And I say that it's, not reflective of market and conditions, but they're just so hard though, right? So in comparable 3 in 2016, the market rents are $265 and $295. And so it's just like, it's in place here right now. And that's what we have here. It's just, it's one of those facts that happen. Comparable 4 and comparable 17, what happens on those two, comparable 4, they have the market rent of $3.50. And in comparable 17, they have the market rent of $2. So these are lower, significantly lower than the $4 I was used in 2016. But we need to take a look at this information here. So what I've done here is for these places in place here, they have 235,000 and 146,000 square feet. But what has happened in the brief here, there's a lease in place for 131,076 square feet. And that rental space is at $5.76. And those are unit numbers 165 and 820. So if you look on the side here, of 165 and 820. If you do the math here with regards to the leasable areas and the monthly paid rent, that rent's $5.76, significantly higher than $3.50 and $2 a square foot. So this is the information that we base our model on, and this is information that I feel is more reflective of market conditions here. Because if you're starting at a superficially low number, which is not reflective of other rents in the area, you get a lower average market rent. So that with regards to the $3.09, no matter what sort of adjustments you make. So it's, there's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. And that's why when it comes to presenting what I have here in front of me, I'm trying to be more reflective of actual market rents. Comparable 6. So comparable 6, the applicant has a rent of $4.08 with an inflation factor of $4.27. If you end up doing the math here on this property, on comparable 6, which is 1400 Saskatchewan, the actual rent is $4.88. Yes, it's 104,000 square feet, but it's significantly higher than $3. And then what happens here is I've showed here the 2017 mailer with regards to the breakdown. Comparable 10, which Robert had adjusted from 335 to 517, I think. I'm just showing the lease in place here. So applicant shows 335 with an inflation factor of 351. Actual lease, not including the free rent, was 525, but for a smaller space. There were no leases in place that started in 2014 for 196,000 square feet, but there was a lease in place for 182, 137. And I didn't include that there. Comparable 12. Applicant shows a rental rate of $3.50 with an inflation factor of 366, 13-year lease. Looking at the 2017 mailer, you could end up seeing that the actual rent in place is $4, which is like on the last screen. So the top part has the summary of the property on Mission, and then you could see the $4 rent in place there on the bottom. So if you get lower numbers, like I've stated before, lower numbers will lead to overall averages. Other leases in place that have taken place here, I haven't provided them the mailers, but I want to show them to you. 55 Dunlop. It was actually Robert was buying on $4.65. Applicant uses it with an inflation factor 487. I have nothing to dispute that. 11 Fife, $4.50 at 108,000. It's because that lease was about to expire. Applicant used $3.93. Saskatchewan, $4.80. Applicant's rent was 408 with an inflation factor of 427. So, when you're incrementally different by, north of 75 cents on many occasions, it's going to end up to being different results. I've shared with you the 630 Carnahan did not have any leases in place of 355,000 square feet. 1725 Sargent, it's we don't have good data here. They have a book rent of 266. It's inconsistent information. Billing information has changed, but the owners and tenants are the same. And Mission was $4. We had $3.66. As a summary, too many inconsistencies in the applicant's rents and methodology with older leases and properties in place. And always remember here, we have a property here where 43% of it was built after 2008. And I've stated here, over 40% of the building has been built since 2008. All large rents used by the assessor have been taken from our income expense failure database. What I've done here, and I just came across a property here. This was information provided by another company in Winnipeg, just showing the cap rate range of properties here. And the ranges are all under 7%. The cap rate on number 5, which is higher, but there's been much dispute about that I think many of us are heard of. As a summary, the effective age of the properties are older than the subject property. We have an effective age of 1990 or 89 for the subject property. When you consider the 40% of the properties after 2008, applicants seeking an overall value which is less than the agreed upon value, which were not appealed at the municipal board, despite the massive improvement and the increases are over 171,000 square feet since 2014. I've mentioned this, there's a dispute with regards to the property value, but there was a sale on 1 Warman Road. The sale wasn't included in the applicant's brief. They have their reasons for discounting it. I have my reasons why I'm not comfortable with their sale price, but this is what we have in the marketplace, which worked out to like, I think $87 a square foot. And the title search was done for the property here, just showing you the information here. I didn't have the numbers listed, but it just shows the due diligence taking place here. And I also want to be mindful of time. Thank you. That concludes my rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Froelich. Mr. Mercury or Mr. Bailey, do you have questions?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Just want to clarify, you were asked earlier, Mr. Froelich, about your rent that you used and the cap rate being both, you clarified that we're both model driven, just so I'm clear, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, which is a little bit different than what you told me. But so to summarize then, you presented a lot of information here, but as the assessor assigned to this particular appeal, what you are giving to us is entirely model based. It is not based on your own personal review and adjustments, correct?
It is model driven. I have provided the 2017 income and expense mailers that derive the model. And so, you know, you can't get a model driven market valuation without it. 2017 income and expense mailers to derive the model. So they're part of the parcel. You know, it wasn't, if I had said subjective, I do apologize for that because it is model driven based on the improvements and the overall valuation of the property.
Okay, but as an assessor appearing before a revision hearing, is it not your responsibility to independently review and have a second look at whether that model driven rent and cap particular or appropriate?
That's I'm defending the property that we're looking at here today. I've provided market evidence to support the market value, and that's why we're going through the board of revision process.
Well, yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this point, Mr.
Well, to me, it seems like you're asking the question over and over again.
No, in fact, your answer has changed, so I'm coming back at this.
Okay.
So you've said you told me earlier this is a subjective exercise. Now you're telling me it's not at all. It's a model driven. So I'm struggling with that.
Well, everything in appraisal work is subjective, but when it's a model driven value, it's a model driven value. So,
right.
like I've stated before, there's 6 of us in this room right here right now. We could all look at this property valuation. We could come up with 6 different numbers. There's a lot of, you know, that's why they call appraisal work and art and a science at the same thing.
All right. And you looked at Mr. You spent some time in your rebuttal. I will defer to Mr. Bailey in dealing with those rents and those comments. But have you attempted to size adjust? You talk about time adjustments and so forth. Any attempt to size adjust the various rents here in any structured way?
Well, I think the overall market rent that we're using represents the adjustment that's taking place for the size.
Okay, very well then. Those are my questions, Mr. Froelich. We'll move on. I guess we'll defer to the board for any additional questions.
Or Robert may have some questions as well.
Robert, do you have any questions?
I just want to comment on some of the things that Mr. Froelich had mentioned about the rents. And I think it's important to clarify the difference in the way we collected data and used data. I don't have access to their mailers or any of that information. And there's two essential differences between what I'm reporting and what he's reporting. He's reporting the current rent as of a certain date. And in some cases, it may include step-ups in the lease, whereas I don't have any of that information. I've gathered my information from three basic sources: brokers, appraisers, and other rents that have been used by the assessor in past appeals. I don't always get 100% reliable information from two of those sources, and I don't have access to the actual leases, and I don't believe he does as well. So what we're reporting can be somewhat inconsistent at times, in that he's getting what the client reported as their total income, where things may have changed. And I know he's made an attempt to do it from the mailers as of a certain date, or the date of the lease. But that's one of the reasons why there's some inconsistencies. And that's one of the reasons I've time adjusted, because I don't always know what step ups there are in leases. And I think that's one of the differences. So I just wanted to make it clear why there are inconsistencies, or some of the reasons that I think there are inconsistencies between what he's seeing in the mailers and what I'm getting from the brokers, appraisers. I don't know why there's variance between what the assessors are reporting in one report and another report. I can't speak to that. And that was the only point of clarification I wanted to make regarding the rebuttal evidence.
And my only comment with regards to that is that the big issue here is with market rent. And
yeah.
When you
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm sure, when we go through our process here, we're referencing the most up-to-date leases that we have here. The reference date for 2022 is April 1st, 2018, and we want to look at the leases from that period of time. And so I just wanted to show that to the board with regards to, I've presented a vast amount of information today, and I'm sure we're all getting tired. But it's it's like I understand where the applicant's coming from, and I just wanted to present information that I was a better reflection of market rents. So
right, and of course, I'm trying to do the same thing, and this is the first time I've seen your rebuttal evidence, so it's a lot to analyze very quickly. But again, it goes back to Inkster, where I did, you used it as a comparable, and when I looked into it, I found that my information was incorrect, but I also found out that your information was incorrect. That there wasn't a lease for 134,000 square feet in 2014 at all. That it wasn't until 2017 that lease came into place. And it was at a different rate, and given that it's closer to the base date, I used that in my rebuttal. So that's just one instance where the sources we were getting it from was creating a disconnect between what you were seeing in your data and what I was seeing from the information I collected. And again, that's another reason why I've time adjusted, not that will completely mimic any step ups there may be in leases.
So if I may, I think that maybe just to bring this back to where the process where we were at, I want to give Mr. Bailey a chance to properly deal with his rebuttal report. Perhaps I could defer to the board if they have questions of Mr. Froelich at this time, and then we could move on to Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. I was trying to find a moment to bring that back exactly. Okay, Mr. McPherson, do you have any questions of Mr. Froelich's rebuttal?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McIntyre.
I do not, thank you.
Okay, and now we can get to Mr. Bailey's rebuttal evidence. Thank you.
Just give me let me bring it up here on my screen, please. Okay, so Mr. Bailey, are you starting at 711 Kernahan?
No, I had only really put that in as
Well, I you know what, in fairness to you, I see it right now because you have rebuttal. I have the right one now because there are two rebuttal briefs, and so I have the right one right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the one is simply one board order, and the other is and somehow it missed getting into my report.
Okay, I'm good now. Thank you.
Yeah, good. I guess the only one thing that I did want to point out again, going back in that first document that you were referring to, I do notice that you did in this brief on 711 Kernahan, you'd referenced, or the assessor had referenced 1750 Inkster and had a rent of $3.12 in that. And I believe that's where my number came from, though I somehow put in the building area rather than the leased area. So, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so I think really we've covered a good deal of my rebuttal report already, particularly concerning 99 Murray Park, and I would like to make a couple comments, and I think Jamie touched on them briefly. The lease for 1345 Redwood, which let me get you the page number for that one.
I think it's 34.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Again, there was a fair bit of work done to this building prior to it leasing to Boeing. My understanding that it was there was over $1 million worth of work done by the landlord, plus there were tenant inducements for a further $800,000, which again, I didn't use this lease because of that, because obviously the landlord would want to be recovering that $1.8 to $2 million over the course of the lease. So I did not feel it was a reasonable reflection of typical market because of that. And again, that would, it again reflects the kind of work that a landlord has to do often to get in a new tenant, as opposed to looking at the space as it exists, which is what we have to do with the appraisal or the valuation for 870 Lagimodier. I do know quite a bit about the lease for 198 to 200 Dawson, which is the next page. And again, Jamie did touch on this. Maple Leaf was a tenant in this building and had been the lease was entered into, one of the two original leases in this building was entered into by Schneider's Foods, which Maple Leaf ended up buying shortly after they'd entered into this lease. And Schneider's had a significant portion of this building built for them. And based on that, they were paying an $11.53 rent for the building, that portion of the building. Maple Leaf did not want to continue with that lease after a certain period of time. And the reason, and it was a long-term lease. It was a 15-year lease with an option for a further 15 years that they were committed to. And they wanted to get out of the lease. But it so happened that the other tenant in the building, VersaFood, was a company that they dealt with quite often. And in order to not have to pay a penalty to get out of the lease, they had to negotiate with VersaCoal to take over their lease. In exchange for that, they would use VersaCoal's services instead of providing the services themselves. So it was really a three-way negotiation for leases that commenced in 1996 and 2006. And all the new lease in 2013 was an amalgamation of those two leases. It was by no means a market lease, and it by no means represented market for rent for this property. So I wanted to put that background into it. And furthermore, as I'd explained earlier, we do have about 40% refrigeration in this building, where this has 85% freezers in this building. And there's a big difference between freezers and coolers. But there's also a huge difference between one contiguous space where you can store things and a bunch of little spaces where you have to go through various corridors to get to. It really would not suit storage, or 870 Lagimodier could never really be turned into a cold storage facility, because you've still got 60% of the space that's not cooled, and cooling would have to be added to get contiguous spaces that you could use for storage. Plus, you would have to remove all the partitioning throughout the building. And given that some of the walls are load bearing, that would be very costly. So they're not at all comparable. And this was not an arm's length lease by any means. It was simply an amalgamation of two long-term leases that began many years before and were amalgamated into a single lease. I think we've spoken about 1750 Inkster, where there was no such thing as a lease for 134,000 square feet in 2014 as reported. And I have adopted, based on your information, I have adopted the 517 per square foot. This is a far superior property to the subject. It's a much smaller property. Again, I spoke with the building owner, and they had put significant money into this property before releasing it. It looks like a new building from the outside. From the inside, all the services are new. All of the offices were new as of 2014, 2015. So again, it's a rectangular warehousing building, and again, it is far superior to the subject. Sony Place, 1370 Sony Place, which is one of the other properties, again, is a rectangular, big box, rectangular space, very superior ceiling heights. again, the lease is reflective of the money that the landlord put into the property to put in the refrigeration to suit brewers, distributors, and the lease rate is reflective. And again, it is fully refrigerated space, unlike the subject, which would cost a lot of money to fully refrigerate. So again, I did not consider that comparable sale. The smaller sales that you used built post 2000, 200 Beijing was a build to suit, and again, it's simply the rent was simply a calculation of the cost to build over the lease time. It does not represent market. 310 Debates is a multi-tenanted building, excellent ceiling heights, but again, it's not comparable to the subject because even though the subject has newer space, it can't be leased out independently. And there's a considerable cost of putting in the services to each of the areas that would be leased out. So again, it's really not, it's not comparable in that sense. It gives you an idea of what new space could go for. But the problem with the subject is you're adding size to the building with every new addition you make, and that diminishes the rent you're going to get for that building, even though the space is newer space. You're only increasing the effective age of the building in a minor way by adding that new space. And I think the same, I have the same comments for 200 Discovery, brand new building. Again, big box, designed for storage. That is not the subject, which is all cut up. 350 Debates, again, was a build to suit with the rent simply being a calculation of the cost to build over the lease term of 15 years. So again, it doesn't really represent market value. And 195 Haggard is post-reference, and it's not similar. It is a truck terminal. It's in no way similar to the subject. And I think those were really the things in my rebuttal. I did put the corrected valuations in the back of my rebuttal, and I did refer to them previously. So I believe that's all I want to say about my rebuttal material.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Sorry, I just had one question, just clarification, if I may, Madam Chair.
Of course.
Just in response to the Mr. Froelich had commented, I went through in his brief the old assessment appeals and certificates of agreement and so forth. And again, do you have any commentary on any of that and how it may have factored into your analysis?
Again, no. I looked at this within the confines of this space here. Yes, I did have to look back further than 2016 for rents because we were dealing with a property that is large, and large properties do not lease all that often in Winnipeg. So I did look at it with fresh eyes. And again, I don't think that, yes, Maple Leaf did accept those, but they're looking at at what is the facility worth today, or as of 2018 in that marketplace. And that was one of the reasons I looked at the Warman sale, because it was a food processing facility. It did sell on the open market, and being far superior would set an upper limit of value for any consideration. And yeah.
Oh, and just finally on his reference to the Johnson report and the average price per selling price per square foot, I think he had it over $70. Do you have any comment on the economy of scale factoring into that?
I think if we looked at those, if we had the backup to look at that, I think we'd find an average building size of probably under 25,000 square feet. And again, the number of $79 a square foot is really meaningless if you don't understand what size that's based on. Yes, there are new and old buildings selling at higher rates and lower rates than the $79. It's not really a very meaningful number to get your average when you don't know what the average is, either in size or age or location. It's a nice statistic, but it isn't really meaningless, and particularly not where you're looking at a building that's 445,000 square feet, because that's not typical of the market.
And again, my final question for you, Mr. Bailey, is having heard Mr. Froelich comment on all of his rents, including the income expense information that he went through, does that in any way impact your final assessment of value for the subject?
No, it doesn't. I'm confident that what I've selected for my rents and the information I've used for my cap rates still holds up. There may be a few flaws here or there that you can point to, and that was one of the reasons for using as many comparables as I could, to make certain that, even though there may be some minor inconsistencies in my data, that overall I was getting a reliable number.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Those are my questions. The board may or may not have questions for you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Froelich, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence? Oh, you're on mute, please. Unmute yourself.
I see that. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's about being
Okay.
respectful. No, I think we're all tired and probably ready to go. I have no questions. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McPherson?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the evidence. Is there any need for a summary, Mr. Froelich?
Well, wouldn't the applicant go first because of the issue of non-compliance?
Oh, yes, you're right. Of course. Mr. Mercury, Mr. Bailey?
Yes, I'll start if Mr. Bailey can supplement anything that he feels he needs to add to this. And I will be very brief here because you've heard a lot of evidence, and I think I'm assuming we're all listening carefully and have absorbed the points that Mr. Bailey has made. But essentially what you have here is not an easy task of valuing a extremely unique property built in 21 different stages in a U-shaped configuration, really to meet Maple Leaf's specific needs. And what I say in cases like this is that we are not here to value the value in use to Maple Leaf, but it's the market value what a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller. And looking at the configuration of this property, the sheer size and age of it, and various challenges, that has to be reflected in the rent, and it has to be reflected in the capitalization rate. appropriately, as this board has done on numerous occasions with larger industrial manufacturing facilities. I will not go through all of the rents again, or any of them, frankly, but this won't be the first time we've dealt with larger properties. This is, however, very much an outlier in the Winnipeg marketplace. You just won't find anything like it. And the reality is, if listed for sale, it's very, very challenging. I would suggest to you to find a buyer, a single occupier, to rent this in the open market at anywhere close to what the assessor has returned the rent at. There'd be a high degree of risk. The reality is, to make this a fully leasable property in the open market would require the injection of significant capital, which would of course drive down the expected rent after you factor in those costs. There was reference to the Murray Park property. I will just point to you in Mr. Bailey's brief where that is, because it is of some importance. This is not just an assessment, it is a board order that resulted after I was involved in this property. Mr. Froelich was involved in this property. You can find it at page 14 of the, starting at page 14 of Mr. Bailey's brief. You can pull it up if you wish, but you will see that this property was 663,544 square feet of a more traditional layout in Murray Industrial Park, which included, as I said, over 100,000 square feet of new space. And you can see it there. The building permits, there's close to $9 or $10 million worth of building permits. You can see on page 19, $9.3 million of recent permits, so newer space, and all of this information was provided to the board. All of it was available to the assessor, and if you see at page 23 of that brief, Mr. Froelich's rent is $3.08, with a suggested cap rate of 7%, and returned at $27,437,000. You will see on page 24 the rents that Mr. Froelich has used, very similar to what you have seen in this case. He's got the Redwood, the comparable, he's got Inkster, he's got Sony, and you've heard reference to Fife, Saskatchewan, Kernahan. And you can see all of those rents coming in at higher numbers. But appropriately, I would suggest in that case what the assessor did, and in that case, but has not done here, is adjusted the rent, size adjusted it correctly in that case, and to reflect the risk of such a large amount of space. And then you will see the board order, Madam Chair. In fact, Madam Chair, appears you were on that panel. This is a hearing that was October of 2019, and the board's decision was based on the assessor's net operating income, that being a $3.08 rent, and a cap rate of 7.5% to arrive at $25,637,000. That is for much more traditional warehouse space, which included a significant amount of new space. But I suggest to you that this is not an unreasonable decision, and in fact reflects market reality. And what we have here is anything close to a traditional warehouse or manufacturing facility, and the rent that Mr. Bailey has put forward is in fact consistent with what was done by the assessor himself on Murray Park. And the cap rate that he's used, 7.75, is, I would suggest, quite appropriate given the relative risk associated with attempting to lease out or sell this amount of, not only this amount of space, but the configuration of this space and how it actually is laid out. Who would the buyer be? A final comment, you can look at the price per square foot of various other properties. You can look at the Warman Road property, which is just over $40 a square foot, which is an old Maple Leaf facility, as a check. You can look at the price per square foot of the Boeing facility as determined by this board, which is approximately $38 a square foot. And that is in and around the range you should be looking at for this property. The assessor's returned price per square foot of close to $59 per square foot is, with the greatest of respect, nowhere close to market reality, and is just not reflective of what a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller. And finally, with respect to old certificates of agreement and board orders, I learned in law school a long time ago that settlement agreements are of no value whatsoever. In fact, there's court decisions on that quite clearly, that the fact that matters are resolved or not even appealed, there's all kinds of reasons why that happens, and there are no precedents whatsoever. What is of importance are, of course, board orders. What is of importance is fairness and equity, as Mr. Froelich himself acknowledged, and of the utmost importance is taking into account the actual market realities in the Winnipeg market in 2018. So with that said, I'd suggest to you that Mr. Bailey's report reflects all of that. And thank you for your patience. I know it's been a very long afternoon, and thank you to Mr. Froelich as well for his patience and talking to me for so long earlier in the day. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mercury. Mr. Froelich?
Does Mr. Bailey want to add anything?
No, I have no further comments.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. When we look at the valuation of this property, I find it ironic how Mr. Mercury says that we need to follow board decisions that set precedent at the board of revision level, but he gives no weight or history to the valuation of municipal board decisions. Municipal board decisions are a higher court than a board of revision level. So there are two municipal boards that have taken place with regards to this property, and they support a valuation at a level which is significantly older in time, and we all know that the property values have increased. They haven't increased. When you look at more specific aspects of this property, there's a lot of weight with regards to the $3.08 with regards to the $4.83 rent that we used. Well, there's a business assessment order at the board of revision level with a starting point of $4 a square foot in 2016. And we know that the marketplace has increased in value since 2016. We also know that 43% of the property was built after 2008, which would also impact the value. So when we're going through this valuation process, there's so many things that we need to look at, we need to consider. Just for clarification purposes, at the end of 2017, the average sale price per square foot was $80 a square foot, not $70 a square foot on the Johnson report. So what we're looking at is a 25% difference from that valuation. And we also got to be mindful of the fact that 43% of it's brand new. There's a lot of talk with regards to the cap rate that we used. Mr. Mercury has stated that, we need to look at the Boeing decision and the cap rate used because it's a newer property. Well, when we're looking at the cap rate here, the Boeing property is 663,000 square feet. The subject property is 445,000 square feet. That's, that is an adjustment of 35%, right? So there needs to be some sort of adjustment there with regard to the cap rate. So if the Boeing, and I'm mindful of the fact that I don't want to be disrespectful of the challenges of the subject property, but I also want to be saying if you want to do adjustments on cap rates based on size, you should probably, if you want to do it on rents, you should probably also do it on cap rates. There's a lot of talk, and I've gone through this exercise with regards to the $8 rents with the rents that I've had for the newer properties. Yeah, I understand that one of them was post-reference, but it was a large property, and it was north of $10. I know I can't use that, but the point is the smaller properties are $8, and the rent that we're using is like, we're not asking for an $8 rent for the new properties. We're asking for something in between, not 308, but something a bit higher to be mindful of the fact of all the dollar values that have gone into it. Common sense would dictate if you increase a building size by 20%, put $21 million worth of value into the property, that the property shouldn't go down in value on a per square foot basis. And it comes back to, we want to put all the weight on board of revision orders, but nothing on the municipal board orders. I guess two other points. The province of Manitoba gave $2 million to Maple Leaf with regards to the valuation of the property for the positive impact they looked for the organization. They're a leader, they're a corporate leader. Well, leadership also means paying your fair share. And so I think the intentions of it is that they weren't anticipating such a significant reduction. But I understand we're looking at market value. And, we talk about market value, we're talking about fairness and consistency with previous assessments. There's also corporate responsibility. And as a final note here, it's when I talked about it from a macro perspective and valuation, the three approaches are value are sales, income, and cost. We've provided information from the Johnson report. The applicant has used one sale. I've referenced one sale. That sale that I've referenced, I'm not using that as market evidence, but I'm saying, are we being reasonable? Are we in the ballpark? And then with regard to the cost approach of these properties, this property is unique. Using the cost approach of this property may be reasonable, but when I did the research using core logic with regards to what we have for parameters, and I understand it's a very superficial, not a detailed analysis, but when I look at the value that I've presented here of $26,495,000, I feel that we're being fair and reasonable to all parties involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Froelich. Okay, that concludes item 2. And we still have item 3 to deal with. So I guess, Mr. Froelich, you're the first guy on this one.
So I'll just interject here. Are you referring, Madam Chair, to the 22?
Yes.
Bill?
Is there anything different?
Nothing.
No?
No.
Okay. Well, we still need to read it into the record.
Okay, yep, no problem. Just bear with me.
And we'll just, you're suggesting we can just take the evidence presented on item 2 and apply it to item 3?
That's correct.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, so we still need to read it into the record.
Okay, file number 21466. I'm assuming that's correct. Roll number 0603005500. The 2021 value, the recommended 2021 value that I have is $26,495,000. Using an area of 455,855 square feet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, then I guess that concludes our hearing today. Thank you very much. It's been a long afternoon and lots of information, that's for sure. So you'll be receiving our order shortly. Thank you.
And just, you probably know this, Linda, but there's also a business assessment appeal on this property on May 3rd.
Thank you.
Okay, just so you know. Okay, thank you.